And? To screw it up less next time, although we can't possibly screw it up as badly as the city is screwing this up.
And
welcome to This Week in Worcester Podcast. I am Tom Marino. I am the editor of This Week in Worcester. I am here with Mr. John Edward Keogh. He is the president of Hollywood Film Group. He is the executive producer of Managing Media. He is a contributor to This Week in Worcester. He sits here every Sunday with me to talk about things.
We do. We talk about a lot of stuff. Worcester
stuff. How has your week, or how was your week rather?
My week was pretty good. It was busy. There was a lot of stuff going on because we're about to enter into production for another short film, and we might have a big announcement coming up of a local documentary, so that's kind of cool. There's lots of cool stuff that's going on in the film side. That's not necessarily, happening in some of the stuff that we talk about. So there's some positive movement in those areas, and I'm excited about it. I'm pretty excited.
Tell us a little bit about the film, and I am killing time because it stopped. Never mind. I was going to fix my awful green screen, but it stopped. Tell us, is there anything you can say about the film yet, or are we waiting for
the film that's come? So on May 13, 14, and 15, we are filming Old Friends. Old Friends is a short film the concept was come up with by Allison Rothwell, who's like a local actress. She lives in Norton. And she's never produced anything before. She's mostly just acted and then helped out for other people's projects. And she decided to put together this thing where she plays a character that's kind of obsessed with this particular guy. In her real life, she's like loves boy bands, all the boy bands from the 90s. And she decided to reach out to Trevor Pennick from O-Town and ask him if he would be in the movie with her. And he said yes. So we have him in a movie, and that's coming up. So we'll be doing that. So right now we're still fundraising. So if you wanna get involved, go to Hollywood.com. That's Hollywood with 3 O's, OOO, and click on projects, Old Friends, and you can see how you can help out there.
Awesome.
But super excited, yet another movie getting done by a Hollywood film.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So here we are. I don't know where to start. So I've been doing a series of columns. There's 2 pieces out. A third one's coming in the very near future, probably tomorrow, if I can't get it done tonight. And that will begin to look at the third piece of that will begin to look at what I would call an almost total indifference to wrongful incarceration in the city of Worcester. It's getting real now, kids. The first piece was kind of an overview of the situation that has evolved since the release of the DOJ report, and the second piece was a look at 3 ways that the city has used to they're not new approaches, but they have used to try and either slow down or suppress kind of any view that's to their alternative on the DOJ report, which is we don't disagree with everything. We've just not mentioning the things that we do agree with unless significantly prodded. The most recent development here is that I'm thinking it's supposed to be next week. There's no council meeting on Tuesday, and then there's a meeting, and then I think they have another week off, and then they still have budget process, if I remember correctly. And so there's not a lot of time here to get that in front of council. Otherwise, it's going to be sometime in June, and that's wholly unacceptable. So that's probably what will happen. The chief was much better in his last appearance before the city council. I thought his appearance before Public Safety Committee was his worst day yet. He would probably disagree with that. But got some answers from him. I've gotten a lot of feedback, a lot. Some of it quite negative, not all of it by any means. I appreciate those that are following along. But when called on obvious contradictions, some people get upset, and you know what? It hasn't even been people in government. It has been those who support some people in government, and some of those who are, they say they support the police, and if you ask them, do you support bad cops too? They say, I support the police. That's a yes. So those type of folks that live behind the blue line, if you will, are trying to camp behind the blue line, even though they're not in law enforcement, have expressed quite some rather forward discontent. Going to continue. I hope you didn't expect anything different.
It's interesting, Tom, because I really don't understand this, but I guess this is just the way that our modern age is. If you disagree with someone, you're against them. If you disagree with someone, you hate them. That's the number one move that I get. I was actually in the courthouse on Friday, and I was talking to a couple people there about various things that are going on, and one of the folks is a longtime employee of the superior court system, and they read your articles and they watch our show, and just the same comment that I've heard from, I don't know, hundreds of people now is, I wish they could just get rid of the folks that did these things. And I always push back with this one thing, and my thought process is, why can't there be an apology, right? Like, why can't anybody say they're sorry? Which, again, a lot of these things that you get hammered about are situations where they've been covered, sure, in detail, really, by you, but no one and no one denies them outright. But we hear things saying that they are being denied or being, limited, and somehow by talking about that, we're bad. And I just it's really hard to deal with, because in the conversations with people, and I'm in City Hall now every week, sometimes more than one day, and the pushback is just so forceful, and it's always on stuff that's obvious, right? So you'll mention, well, what about this video? Like last week we talked about the video where the guy was being slapped on the gurney on the side of Main Street. Oh, well, that happened in 2020. So it's because it happened back then. It has no validity, right? So
yeah, that was one of the points that the chief brought up. There was two things that he brought up that I certainly did not like. It was and it was kind of in the same sequence. One was, some of the stuff happened 7 years ago. Okay. Okay, but you never dealt with it. It's never been dealt with. It's never been like, there's journalists love to use this phrase, but the disinfectant of the bright lights, right? The disinfectant of the sunshine, the disinfectant value of the sunshine, and in that if you bring things to light, they will, it will be uncomfortable as that initial conversation begins, but as there's public awareness and there's discussion, the how terrible these things starts to wane. But if they're never dealt with, and people are trying to get you to deal with them, regardless of how long it is, beyond the time that it occurred, you don't get to just kick the can forever. And every time somebody tries to say, hey, why don't you address this? You say, that was a long time ago. Well, but you're the one that won't address it. So, if you had, we wouldn't be bringing this up so long ago. And the other thing that I didn't like that he said, and I thought he was otherwise pretty good. But, can't we just want to move on? We're doing we're doing the things and we just want to move on. You don't get to move on.
No, so yeah, I thought that was again. I wonder often like who like what strategy sessions are happening, what conversations are happening before we get to the point where there these things that are happening in public, and the moving forward phrase, it was used consistently by 6 counselors and the chief and the city manager. It was like we're moving. Everybody managed to hit that term, like moving, except for Donna, who didn't speak. But everybody managed to hit that phrase, moving forward, and now we're moving forward. And
I actually I don't think Councilman Carlson spoke during that either.
Or Candy. Candy didn't speak either, but Louis did. Louis hated it, and he used the term "moving forward." We're moving forward, and so that really strikes me as like, I don't know if they think this, but to me it seems coordinated, right? That everybody all of a sudden is saying we're moving forward because they decided that this was the meeting where we were going to admit that there were things in the report that are true, and then the city manager saying out loud that he doesn't understand how anybody could ever think that that's why people would think that when the lawyer that they hired said that. Right. Like, it just blows my mind. And then when asked that question, there's just kind of no response. It's like, well, we're going to let the lawyer deal with what the lawyer said, but the lawyer said something that directly materially relates to something you said. So how do you go back and forth on that? And to be honest with you, this is you can definitely feel, and I know I know our colleague Bill Shane has talked about this a lot, this kind of access in exchange for something, right? So like, as journalists, we get access, but we can't Fred says moving forward. So like, if we don't get with the company line, right, then we're going to lose access, right? And so my response to that has been, well, what access do I have anyways? No one tells me the truth. I get a lot of rumors, and I mean, we've been fed stories. Like, Tom and I have been fed stories. You guys have no idea some of the stories we've been fed, and we have not printed them because we actually do our jobs and verify. And by the way, some of the stories are like super juicy, and you wanna run with them, but you can't. So then it just really does boggle the mind. I will say that I agree with you that he did better because he was admitting to some things based on some pushback, but realistically, it was because of the article in the Telegram and Gazette. And that I just don't understand, Tom, because there is still this, I don't want to say penchant, but there's still this like cachet that the Telegram and Gazette seems to possess when it comes to the elected and appointed officials of our city, in that if it's said in the Telegram and Gazette, it's like the gospel truth, which and I don't want to take away from Brad Petroshan, because I think Brad's an incredible reporter. I think he's a great reporter. He's an asset to the city of Worcester that you have a guy like that in there. But the all of a sudden, because the Telegram and Gazette wrote one negative article, there's a vast media conspiracy that just popped up, and they were running us down in the city council. And I'm sitting there just like, what? When did this ever happen? And this, again, it goes to, you and I have talked about this a bunch of times. If you disagree, you're considered an enemy. And so, because we've disagreed in the past, they just group us in because Brad wrote an article critiquing the press release, which the press release, if you just go back to the press release, first of all, it's the longest press release in history because it verbatim quotes everything the chief read at the Public Safety Committee.
And it took him 35 minutes.
Yeah, it's a super long. It's one of the longest press releases I've ever seen, and so none of it was positive. So then when we moved to Tuesday, and all of a sudden he agrees with some stuff, it's like, hey, why wasn't that in the press release? And of course, we as journalists understand that sometimes getting the story out first is more powerful than the actual story. And so this is definitely an attempt to shape the narrative in the city of Worcester. There's no doubt about it. And so the thing is that you're dealing with Tom Marino here, and Tom's not having it.
I'm
just
so
not having
over it. I'm
it. And
so over it.
he's a better writer than whoever wrote that thing. And so that's, and I'm not trying to critique whoever did it. I'm just saying that what ends up happening is you're going to have, yeah, we were there, Fred. So what you end up having is it's almost like we're going to have to educate the public, and I think that they think the public is stupid, and that there's no doubt about that. That's how they feel, and that's how they approach it. But I don't want to necessarily pin that thought process on the chief. But it definitely seems to be a universal approach to anything where anyone disagrees with the city. Anytime there's a disagreement, you're an idiot, you're against Worcester, you move out, go to another town, all this other stuff that happens when you're just talking about bringing, like you said, some light onto the situation.
Yep. It's really, I don't even, a shame it doesn't describe it well enough, but we'll go with that. When this thing first dropped, folks in the union that represents the officers, sergeants and above, sergeants up to lieutenants and captains, its initial response was, "Oh dear God," and then, but it was the administration that set the strategy, right? I mean, the reporting, I think it was Brad in the TNG said, so after the chief and the city manager got together, they had a narrative together, and that's the narrative they've been pushing since then. And I just, where does all this political cachet come from that the unions have? I mean, let's just be honest. There's, city councilors that, lobbyists? Are they lobbyists for the police unions and sitting in city council? I mean, that on this issue, that anyone would stay silent for the over 50 minutes this conversation went on, and nobody, councilors didn't ask any questions or say anything. How is that? That's the choice they made, rather than get up and be heard in an election year? Because God knows this is all done. If you forget for a second that there is an election in November as the backdrop to all of this, you're doing it wrong, because that's very present in all.
It's definitely an election. It's definitely election year for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that somebody, two folks that have been in politics for a long time, that based on their supporters, right, the people that they need to get to vote for them, or retain voting for them, that they decided it was better to not say anything than say anything. That's crazy.
I think it's a calculated gamble, Tom, and I think it's based on the history of Worcester politics. And I think what it is that the calculated gamble is this: nothing truly bad is going to come out between now and the election, in their opinion. And no one is going to be able to get all of the information to make it stick to somebody. So they figure, and that's how it's kind of always been. Remember, most of the time when we do find out scandal in Worcester, we find it out like 10, 15 years later. And that's when we get the details. And that's when we find out about this person that did this or this person that did that. And in this case, I think that they believe that the system that they've set up to guard information is just impenetrable, and so no one will ever get at it. I do believe that there's enough people, and I don't want to say every single person, but I do believe there's enough people within the inner circle, secret sanctum, the people who make decisions for the city without ever having the public be involved, that group knows where all the bodies are buried, right? Where all the deep, dark secrets are, because there's too many hit pieces directed at anyone who touches near those cases without ever mentioning the cases. And that's what really strikes me. And then the concerted efforts by the entire leadership team to never mention until this Tuesday, never once mentioned the cases that had been clearly concluded, right? That there was video of, and then we had Chief Saucier actually say out loud for the first time, yeah, there's some videos there that have certain things, but he couldn't talk about it. And I don't want to get the quote wrong. You and I discussed this week at some point, exactly what his quote was. But that's an important admission, but at the same time, it's not specific. It was just, yeah, there's some things that was on some video, and we know that those things are bad, but they happened years ago. And it was also qualified, right? So he qualified it. But it's the most you've ever heard, ever in Worcester, and it just kind of passes over because of the overwhelming force against the report that has just blatantly slammed it. While City Manager Batista was standing up talking and said, I don't know why anybody would think that me or anybody here was totally against the report. Literally at that moment, two current and soon to be non leaders of local unions were in the chat on the Worcester version of the broadcast, hammering away at the report, just going nuts in the chat. And I that's why. It wasn't just that the city manager had an attorney say it. It was that every union leader said it. It was that even the guy from the national, the Brotherhood of Police, the big guy, Chris something, I forget his name. He came on and made a Yeah, the New England guy. He made a statement. It was the police wives person made a statement. Every single person was like, "This report is garbage," and how dare they release that? And it still happens even in Tuesday. Not one of them ever acknowledges, as your point, that they cannot release the names. That this is a civil investigation, not a criminal one, and literally the law itself, which is only one paragraph long, it says that they can't release the names of the victims or the perpetrators. So, and they refuse to acknowledge that. They just say, "Why won't they release the names? Why?" And then there are people in the public who ask me all the time, "John, why won't they release the names?" And I'll show them the law, Tom. I have a printout.
They don't care. They don't care. It's unbelievable.
They don't care. They don't care. It's mind-boggling.
Well, the reality is that the only time names have been released from one of these reports, it only happened once, that I'm aware of at least. And no, you don't believe the things that are on video, Fred, huh? I do not believe our friend Fred Nathan. I do not believe any of this BS report. Even the things on video you saw with your own eyes. This is what I mean. The cognitive dissonance, the willingness of people to just like, no, what my masters are telling me is true, what my eyes see is false. But
what about the stuff that Fred? My question is to you: what about the 3 pages of stuff the chief said was true? You don't believe any of that? Are you saying the chief is a liar, Fred? Because we'll see him next week, and I'm happy to tell him that you think he's a liar. You think he's a liar? Because he just admitted on Tuesday that there's a bunch of stuff that's true. So does that make? Do you take that into consideration when you make these comments? Did you even listen to the chief? Did you leave too early? Did you watch back? Because this is the same thing I've heard again. Multiple officers that I have, that I'm friends with, that have been telling me stuff all along, say the same thing. And then I said, well, is the chief a liar? Did he lie on Tuesday when he said that there are things that are true? I think there could be. So then don't.
Anyway,
Worcester.
Didn't mean to raise my voice. Didn't mean to raise my voice at you, Fred. It makes me a little upset.
That's all right. Fred brought us Fig Newtons on this last Tuesday. You did not take a Fig Newton because you were not happy.
I was not happy.
He was not happy. He refused the Fig Newton. But I will tell you this: a couple of deputy chiefs, I won't name them, took Fig Newtons. I can't name them though. That's secret secret reporter information. But by far, this
I
report was. You didn't listen to the chief at all, Fred, because the chief said that wasn't true either. So no.
yeah.
He said that he never said that, and so you're just making it up.
And
But that's
I also have the email that he referenced.
yes.
That the student is a student at Harvard Law School. They are a candidate for the JD next year. Probably the most prestigious law school in the country. Did their undergrad at Brown. Seems like a really smart kid. And the email did not say I edited the report. It actually said I helped edit the report, which makes the statement quite different.
And also the chief said that one of his quotes was, "I never said that an intern wrote the report." So because he was responding to, again, Brad Petroshan's report in the TNG, where it was suggested that the chief suggested, although you heard that here at This Week in Worcester first on the This Week in Worcester podcast, immediately after the public safety meeting where Tom and I talked about it. But Brad did write it in his article, and then the chief responded. Enough said. See, but that's the thing, is the chief said that didn't happen, Fred. So again, I'm on Tuesday. I'll introduce you to the chief again, and you can tell him you said he's a liar.
Yep, Harvard's terrible place. Four current Supreme Court justices, including two that you probably like. Anyway, moving on. So, we're kind of in the same. I mean, it's good that they mentioned something. Oh, this is what I want to say. The chief said that, which I found curious, that he couldn't talk about, any of the individual cases, because the individual who was there to talk about disciplinary measures would have to be present, and whatever. So first of all, I asked the police department for clarification on where that comes from. I was referred to the law department. And of course, we have to go through a specific handler, which I did that. And the response I got back was I was referred to the law on executive session. What? So it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's because that would be something that would be eligible to be discussed in an executive session, but they can't be. They have to be there. I didn't get that. So I'm going to dig some more at that. I just don't think.
Yeah. So Tom, that's very interesting because remember the order, the little snafu over the order earlier this year, where Councilor Bergman wanted to change the language from may to must on anything related to personnel had to be done in executive session. If you remember that, there was that little kerfuffle either late last year or early this year. I forget which city council session it was. And then, of course, the law department responded that it already says may, but it's interesting that you got that response because that seems to be a backtrack from that earlier position presented by the law department. And again, this goes to another issue that Tom has been hammering for years. There is no lawyer for the city council, which means that any version of interpretation that we may or may not like or agree with doesn't matter because the city manager's attorney is almost always going to be the person making those calls. I understand there's more lawyers than just one in the law department too. I'm not criticizing them because they're doing their job. Their job is to represent the city in the department of the city manager. And so, of course, they need to come up with interpretations that fit within the framework of their boss's prerogatives, right? So that makes a lot of sense to me. But it doesn't necessarily make it the law. One of the great examples is the current rules of the city council call for the chair to control decorum. And one of the things that Mayor Petty has made his calling card is that he will not allow profanity while he's the chair of the city council. And he's done that for years now. We're 14 years into that. That is unconstitutional. Unconstitutional, on its face, unconstitutional, because if you wanted to, legally, you can walk up and there are multiple decisions, including not just federal decisions, but also state decisions, including a recent one in Southbridge, right? I believe it was Southbridge, where you can walk up to the city council thing and cuss all you want. That is the law. You're allowed to do that. That's what it is. The only time they can control your speech is if you were to threaten somebody, them, a building, whatever. If you were to do some kind of threat, then you'd be subject to speech. But you could still say it, Tom. They could then punish you for saying it, right? So
that's how crimes work.
doesn't mean you couldn't say it. You can say whatever you want. And so I just want to point that out, that's an interpretation that they've created that's not legal, but no one's ever challenged it. So therefore, it kind of just operates as if it's the law. And I think there's a lot of things like that in what municipalities. People don't realize how much work it would be for people to go through every single rule and every single decision that they've made to find out what's unconstitutional or not, because we just don't have the capacity to do it. We just don't. We just don't. In fact, our current, sitting president has said that out loud in relation to the immigration stuff, that to give every single person in the immigration process a trial could take millions of, Sean, it came through, that there would be millions of trials, which I don't know. That means that they're saying that there's millions of people. So I don't know if that's true or not too. That seems propaganda-ish, but that it would be the case that they would all get a hearing, a due process, a habeas corpus hearing. And so that hearing, you have to have a clerk and you have to have this and that and all these other things that are necessary that cost a lot of money. And so what they're arguing, Tom, is a money issue, not necessarily a legal issue. And that's difficult to parse because we just don't have the resources. If This Week in Worcester becomes the most watched podcast in the city of Worcester when it comes to politics, and we become multi-zillionaires because of all the people sponsoring the This Week in Worcester podcast. By the way, if you do want to sponsor the This Week in Worcester podcast, you can reach out to Tom or I, and we can talk to you about that. If we become millionaires and we can independently finance that kind of legal challenge, I'm sure we would. But at the current state, I am not a millionaire. Are you a millionaire yet, Tom? No.
I'm barely 1,000.
Anybody in the chat millionaires yet that wants to help us out? Anybody?
Yeah.
We accept all support.
So onward we march, I suppose. Just back to real quick and then we can move on.
It was Southborough, not Southbridge. Southborough.
Southborough, yes, correct.
Yeah.
If they talk about repairing the relationship between many folks in this community and the police department, and that's possible. But I mean, I think the word you're looking for, and they don't want to use this word because this means that they have to do stuff, rather than just believe us, we're doing better, and let's all be happy, is reconciliation. There has to be a reconciliation on some of this stuff. The people that at least were ultimately responsible for many of these things that are come to top of mind are gone. Right? The city manager, the last city manager obviously is gone. Last chief obviously gone. So there's some distance from that stuff, right? But I mean, to ignore it and just say, oh, well, it's fine now. Oh, I can't talk about discipline. Oh, I can't talk about if we've, if a person doesn't work for the city anymore, which that's nonsense. It's all because let's just be frank, because they don't want to talk about that stuff, because then they can be held accountable, right? Because then if somebody does something awful, then they ask, and they've set a precedent that they'll answer if the person does or does not work for the city anymore, and the answer is always going to, at least related to the police department, is always going to be this: they still work for the police department, no matter what they did, outside of stealing, allegedly stealing detail time, and getting convicted for sexual assault, because there was a first-hand witness. If it was only the woman who claimed that what was his name, Rajat Sharta, who I think is out but went to prison for a term for a sexual assault he committed allegedly. I guess it's not allegedly because he was convicted, but committed in uniform. The problem is there was another person there. If that other person wasn't there, they'd probably be denying that too.
I think that a lot of the cases that we've talked about only resulted in us even knowing about it because there happened to be a video or there happened to be some kind of evidence that came out afterwards. In every single one of those cases, a person was either arrested. Not everybody went to jail, but they were cuffed, right? They were cuffed and put in a position and then allowed, and I know you're writing an article about this, so I don't want to like reveal too many things, but folks were locked up that were innocent, and then we found out afterwards that those reports were not true. And then of course video came out in some of the cases. And so, one of the things that you and I have talked about, and not just us, but other reporters as well, is that, well, if this is the case of the ones we know about, how do we know that? Isn't that the whole point? So the law in court, how you go after people is you attack their credibility, right? So, for example, if I was to testify in some case, they would use my record, right? And they would say, well, you should question his credibility because of this record, right? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that I was not truthful. It just means that they think that jurors would say someone with a record is more untruthful than someone without, right? That's how they approach it. And of course, and it makes sense. I don't have a problem with that. I've been gone at enough to know that that's how people feel about me. But the point is that it doesn't necessarily hold true that someone who lied, I don't know, the last 15 times is going to lie this time, right? They could be telling the truth. In a court of law, however, that does very much go to whether or not a jury will believe you, even if you are telling the truth. And so what we're talking about here is literally officers who have been dishonest. And so that dishonesty, if it's led to a false incarceration, as Tom, pointed out in this week's article, that you should never have a job ever again, because you intentionally and willfully went all to this level, that you lied so much that you took it to court. That's crazy. We only found out later. And that's really, really difficult for us to not understand why someone wouldn't listen to that. By the way, this doesn't just apply to the police. This also applies to, like, I don't know, Madison Properties, who blatantly lied in their approach to Polar Park because they were never really intending to build those other properties. They just wanted to get in on the money. And then they shifted. As soon as they had a chance to, they shifted out of the money. And they never cared about the TIF. The TIF had nothing to do with what they were going to do. They just wanted to hold it on and see if they could find a way to sell that to somebody else, right? And that's how a lot of developers do it. That's just a dishonest approach. Not every developer is doing it that way. It is discoverable if it's written down, Sean, but it's not always written down. And that's what Tom and I are trying to talk about, that sometimes victims who have come forward, as Councilor King pointed out, their credibility is immediately attacked because they happen to have a record. They do a background check on someone. So if you're a witness and you come forward and you say, hey, Sean assaulted me, and you're a big time police lieutenant, let's just say, and Sean's assaulted me, and the first thing that the police say to me is, well, I want to run your record and see where you're at. Am I gonna want to go forward with that report? That's a cudgel. It's an immediate weapon against anybody who comes forward. So of course they didn't go forward. They were scared, right? They were scared there was a warrant, or somehow they were going to manufacture something. They used the power of the badge to induce fear in the person who may have had a credible report.
Right. And when you see these, they use a disposition on on the complaint process that's called resolved at intake. And, that sure sounds like, no, you can't file that report, which we hear all the time, that people go to the police department and are told they can't file a report. We hear that consistent drumbeat of that, which should never happen.
So let's go even further in that, Tom. What is intake?
Right.
They arrested the person for something. We don't even know what it is. But in some capacity, that person is under arrest. So then they get.
Oh no, I don't. I think they mean the intake of the complaint. That's why I think somebody shows up the window and says they want to, and then somebody talks them out of it, or tells them they can't, or or maybe, hey, look, this is I'm sure they present it how they present it as, and I'm sure it's true in some cases. They talk to the person, and the person goes, oh, okay. And maybe that's honest, but I mean, again, we see so much nonsense. I don't know why you expect us to take anything at face value.
Right. And so, and again, and let me add to our credibility right now. So Chief Saucier, in particular, we have supported, openly supported, even though, by the way, I get hammered for that from certain people in the community. Like, why are you supporting this guy? And I support this guy because I do think that generally he's an honest man. That's how I've always been, and I can't help but use my own personal lived experience with him. When I wrote the articles on the drones, and I was being called a liar by sitting city councilors on the floor of the city council. Which, by the way, I've been looking for that tape and I can't find it. I'm sure I will eventually figure it out. But I got to go back even farther in time. But anyways, um, he was the one who brought me in to the police department and showed me the drones. Not only showed me the drones, but I met with Officer Brian Green, who was the guy who designed the training program that they had been training since 2016. And if you remember, which I'm not asking everybody to remember every single Worcester politics thing, but a manager Augustus said they had never initiated a training program at all, and that it was the first time ever that they were using the money for the drones. And I proved that to be not true. By the way, part of the reason I found that out was I was walking by a local high school, which will remain nameless, and I saw a drone flying inside a gym during COVID. And I that's how the story started. I was like, hey, this is weird. And I went and I investigated it because that's what reporters are supposed to do. And so I went down that lane until I found the story. And so, but the chief brought me in, and I was the first person ever to take a picture of the 2 police drones, which, by the way, at the time they had said there was only one. And so I got the bill of sale, and these are all documents that I was able to find. So at the time, the chief of police, which was Steve Sargent, was telling me to my face that I was a liar. And the deputy chief at the time, Paul Saucier, let me in and showed me that that was in fact not true. So that's how I have to view these things. I have to view it through the lens of he was honest in that situation under the gun, kind of, and allowed me to view it. And then he took a better position. By the way, Tom, are you against drones in general, just like anti-drone?
No. I mean, if used for the right things, they can certainly be a life-saving tool. But if they're going to be used for surveillance, that's I have an issue with that.
Right. Same here. And I do agree that sometimes they can be, especially if someone gets lost in the woods in the cold, there's all kinds of things that you could do to use them to help somebody. It wasn't against it. We were against the fact that they lied blatantly for months on this issue for no reason, when every other town in Massachusetts almost had already gotten a drone. So it didn't matter why. Like, it didn't matter why they lied. Just at the time, that was kind of the way that they went about things. And so what we're saying is that information process that used to exist, okay, I believe that this chief is trying to eliminate that thing. I do think that. But we know that there's officers who participated in that are still a part of the process. Right? So now we're saying, what happened to them? Did they stop thinking that way now? Should we never question them ever again? Like, how do you get that? Do we need more drones and ShotSpotter? Freaking Fred. Why don't we just put ShotSpotter on the drone, Fred? We combine the 2 of them. We're just gonna have a drone floating around with the ShotSpotter attached to the bottom. That'll go over well. Actually, maybe I shouldn't say that out loud because the chief loves technology, so maybe he's gonna come up with some shot. I mean, the people at ShotSpotter probably watch our show, Tom, and they're gonna come up with a floating drone that does the shots.
I have a really quick, fun ShotSpotter story. So I did a story, I think it was 2022. It was the first time I met the now chief, Saucier. Yep. And so I put the story out, and I get it gets retweeted by the CEO of ShotSpotter and said, "Good article." Because I mean, I was, I put both sides of it, right? And I have hedged on the gunshot detection technology. There's a lot of intangibles. In short, what I found was there's a lot of intangibles there that are hard to measure, and that certainly increase the value of the system. Is kind of where I got to. And after I see that tweet, the retweet, of me tweeting out the story from, This Week in Worcester account, I get a 4-page, like they rewrote my whole thing from their PR firm. They rewrote the whole piece. And I just emailed them back and be like, you gotta be out of your mind. Like, this isn't a correction. This is rewriting the piece as a PR piece. Go to, I think going back and forth with them, I don't think I got their email and then saw the tweet. And after a couple back and forth with them, I then just, screenshot the tweet and sent it to him. I said, I think I did okay. And that was the end of the conversation. But, I forget the PR firm now. I hadn't heard of them before, but, I'll give them an A for aggressiveness. But they got no changes. So, I guess good hire by the ShotSpotter people, because that's, I guess, what you want out of your PR firm. But it was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. Inserting paragraphs was what they wanted for corrections. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing any of this. Meanwhile, the CEO thought it was a good article. That's my quick ShotSpotter anecdote. So, yeah, moving on. I think we've reached the end. And I said earlier there's no meeting next week. There is a meeting this week. I think it's the following week that they're off. So my mistake. I just looked at the agenda real quick, and no report on what's true in the DOJ report. Shocking. Trash bins and trash. This is on you.
Trash. So, many people have followed along with the kind of the long-running saga of trash cans, public trash cans. City of Worcester has had a limited amount of trash cans in the city for a very long time. And let me say this, the initial reasoning behind it was that people used to dump in those trash bins all the time. So people would pull up. There's one famous one on the intersection of Chandler and Park Ave across from the Speedway that used to be where people would like stuff like whole mattresses into. Like, it was insane. And I only know this because I used to walk that way all the time. Especially when I was going to Clark, I would walk down there and then walk up. And people just put all kinds of trash in there. So the city, kind of deactivated a lot of trash cans and moved in these other directions. Oh my God. No. You can't do that in the middle of something. It's just too much. It's too much. Throw that thing in some rice, the F-18.
Well done, Shawnee. Well done.
Real quick side note. The F-18 program is technically classified. So whenever you mention the F-18 program, you are mentioning classified material. Just goes back to that signal chat. Anytime the F-18 is referenced, it is a classified piece of documentation. So anyways, real quickly, and if you don't like it being unclassified, you can talk to Congress, which in the appropriations for it, Congress has the right, power of the purse, declared it to be classified materials. And so that would have to be overturned for it to be true. And the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which gets passed every single year, has been passed every single year since 1959, basically on a universal vote. Okay, so moving back to the trash cans, they released some new trash cans into the wild. After going through some stuff. So you get some new trash cans in the downtown zone, and they're being installed, and big kind of fanfare. And they were talking about that. And in the context of that conversation, Councilor Russell had an order on asking about what happens to trash when people, they can't, Fred, because these trash buckets are very difficult to put bags into. You have to put like small items into them. They have these very small openings. So someone was going through somebody's trash apparently in District 3, and they called up Councilor Russell and started asking what happens to my trash after it leaves my house. And of course, if you follow along, again, this comes back to constituents and the people of the city of Worcester just really not truly engaged on one part, and also the city having a terrible record of explaining things to people that are happening. But there was a zero waste program in the city of Worcester that existed under Ed Augustus and was actually part of the portfolio of current city manager Eric Batista when he was the assistant city manager, right? So this is one of the programs that kind of he shepherded along, and this is to reduce our waste in the city of Worcester and I forget which year is the target year. I think it's like 2035. But by 2035, we will no longer increase our waste out. We're going to reduce it to zero, right? And one of the ways they do that is by sorting the trash in the trash facilities. You can actually bring your stuff down there yourself. And there was a big argument over whether landlords can bring stuff down there also that Councilor Bergman brought up. But anyways, I digress. The whole point is that people do go through your trash. Okay. And they usually go through it at the city, at the facility, right? So there was this big concern over that, and Manager Batista had to explain that that's not what happens, but he did mention that people come through the neighborhood where he lives and take bottles out of the recycling bins. Which, by the way, if you're really struggling and you want to hustle, you could do that. It's completely legal if someone puts something on the curb that you can do it. You can even take, if you really want to, you can take someone's trash. It's once it's on the curb, it can be. Just understand the law in the United States. If you put something on the curb to be collected by a municipality, it is now no longer your property. It's called abandonment, and if it was then grabbed, it can be used. Now, it can't be used against you to like form a crime, right? But it could be used if there's something in there to get a warrant to then do a further search, right? So that was a concern. Someone apparently was worried about something that they had in their trash getting searched and them getting in trouble for it, right? So, anyways, my whole it goes to the wheelabrator and burned. Zero sort. Well, so Victor, that's interesting because the city manager said there actually is a sort process at the facility. So he said something completely different, Victor. You can talk to him about that. But he mentioned that there is some kind of sorting process that is done, and that was what the big issue at the city council was. Well, the reason I bring this up, the whole point of this is that people like Victor who do trash and recycling kind of stuff in the city, they know this information. Our city councilors are putting on orders where they do not know about the process. And that is really damning. So that's good. See, Victor's an expert. So he owns Victor, just put the name of your company in the chat there. If that's true, why don't our city councilors know that? Oh, I can tell you, they're only part-time employees. In the second biggest city in New England, they're only part-time employees. Yeah. And so on a regular basis, they put orders on where they don't know. Crews contracting. So Victor does a lot of stuff picking up people's trash. And Victor's also, he's kind of the leading guy helping remove needles from the public parks here in the city of Worcester. So if you are interested in getting involved, get a hold of Victor. He'll help you out. The city councilors should know this information. They should know this information, and they don't. They just don't. And that's the thing that really drives me crazy is why are we? What's the point of having a government when only one person or department knows anything? And it's often the city manager. And then the city manager had to answer on the question from Mo Bergman about a policy change related to who can schedule the appointments for the big items to be removed, mattresses and all that stuff. And the city manager didn't know. He said that, I don't know, I have to check into it. This is what we're talking about. And this is why we really, really, really should go into a different system, change the charter and get back to a strong mayor and a full-time council, because only then will we have people that are really informed, because our city councilors are often not.
But, I would say this, having no oversight power and having no right to access information, but yet everything, every piece of information they are able to get is, comes through into the administration in the form of, a letter usually. Sometimes, depending on the issue, they're largely position papers. This is what our position is. And there is no alternative is kind of how it's presented, right? I don't necessarily blame the city manager's office for doing that. That's, again, I think largely he's playing the game by the rules he was handed.
Right.
But nobody in city, there's very little pushback on that in city council. And unlike other cities in the state, our city charter does not actually does not provide the direct power to conduct oversight, which is subpoena power. You're entitled to certain documents, or the power to require somebody to come in and provide evidence by way of testimony, and swear to tell the truth while they do it. They can't do any of that.
Right.
They should be able to, but that's the way it's always been done. And since this form of government was created in the 80s, and we also have a very go along and get along culture, which is also part of the problem.
But it strikes right at something. So Councillor King brought up something that I think is important. He was talking about the second half of the DOJ report response, right? It wasn't included in the chief's original response in the Public Safety Committee. And he wondered out loud, when is that part coming along? The chief started to address it on the floor, and Councillor King ended up holding that item. So now it's being held for another week. They also pushed several other items for various reasons, but this item got on the agenda. And then the city manager, it was referred to the city manager. Now he's going to do a report on that. One of the things we've seen is that the city manager then determines which report he's going to give back, right? So which report is going to be important, which one is going to be delivered. And very rarely do you see a time limit attached to an order from a city council where they say, we want this report by such and such date, right? That's a very rare thing. And the reason why is because it's kind of like that's like a normal process, I guess, in our city, in our government, where they just kind of don't put pressure on them to deliver it on a timely basis. But this has been happening more and more. You hear the councilors say, and not just one side now. Councillor King said this. Councillor Merrill Carlson mentioned this in relation to the college stuff. Councillor Bergman mentioned this in relation to the inspection program. Councillor Pasillo mentioned this related to the parks, the Elm Park, and these different reporting requirements that the city has. The city manager determines when those reports come back. Yet another form of control the city manager has over the city council. So the city council can only respond really once they get those reports. And if they don't have the reports, what happens to the issue that might be really pertinent, right? It might take forever. Echo was at the city council with the youth, talking about the funding changes that have happened with the youth programs in the city. And the city manager, said, well, I'm going to take a look at that. I'll try to get a report back. So now I think that's a very important thing. And you would want the city manager to return that report like next week, right? Immediately. Let's find out. Is there enough money for the youth? Is that going to happen in a timely manner? I don't know. And the city manager probably is going to mention that there's a lack of staff even on his department. So these are the things that with 508 Cheers, Echoes with 508 Cheers, who is one of the organizations, and what's the other one, Echo, that you work with, the Worcester Community Action Council, that really is involved in hiring, high schoolers and students during the summertime and giving them summer jobs, which I think everybody's for those things. But the city manager's releasing of that information is going to really determine whether or not we know about it in time. And so I think that that's a legitimate concern. Why are all of our reports, kind of tied up? It goes back to the city council does not have staff to do their own research. They do not have enough people. They need a lawyer and they need a larger staff. Every councilor should have their own staff. They should be full-time. They should be full-time positions. And it should change the nature of city government in Worcester because it's just not working when we don't have the information unless. So youth works and the WCAC, that's Echo, who was there at city council on Tuesday.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just I'll defend the manager's office a little bit here. There's also a backlog of thousands of reports. They couldn't possibly do all the reports. They couldn't possibly because there's no other access to information for city councils but through asking for reports. And so you've had this backlog of reports. You could never complete all of them. So it puts him in a spot where he can pick and choose, based on priority. And whose priority is he going to pick on? Of course he'll get feedback from them, but in essence, if he's trying to drive something, that's the reports that he's going to return. If he's trying to sit on something or he doesn't want to see something go forward, he'll just wait for them to complain about it.
I completely agree with you too. Like there's a lot of reports. There's not only that. There's an unwillingness for the city council to engage with their own internal things. There are 10 items every week now that are tabled. 17, usually section 17. It's section A through J right now. There's 10 tabled items, including one from Constantina Lukes before she was mayor, when she was just a councilor, on rent control. And the city council, because of politics, doesn't want to deal with issues and often will table them, and they just kind of sit there for a long period of time. The part of it is what Tom just mentioned right there. They just don't have the staff, because the way the budget is described, you just don't get the amount of people that you would need. And we all know that we don't want to talk about the dreaded intern word, right? Because apparently interns are bad, but a lot of times people who do that research are interns, right? You need interns to do research like that, to sit there all the time. Sometimes when Tom and I are on the show right now, I never would have known what Victor knew, because I don't pretend to be an expert on trash, but I know Victor knows that stuff. So the fact that he happens to be in our chat today means I don't have to go looking it up, right? But in other cases, the city councilor doesn't know. That's way more important than me. I'm just John. But if a city councilor is sitting on the city council floor talking, speculating about something, there's no one to help them give the information except for the manager. And as Tom just pointed out, he has thousands and thousands and thousands of reports that he has to deal with. And yeah, Fred, that's what I mean. It's been on the city council agenda for 6 years, because it's just sitting there on the agenda, because it's never been addressed. Which, by the way, they addressed. Go ahead.
I was going to say my favorite tabled item is a request for the public safety committee to have hearings on systemic racism in the police department. And at the time that was tabled, it was because it was first. There was a motion to file, which failed. And then Council Toomey, who's the chair of the Public Safety Committee, stood up and said, we already have an agenda for our next meeting. We have crime stats to look at. I don't know what that tells you, because, again, police officers don't prevent crime, they respond to it. And, by and large, the vast majority of the work any police department does is responding to reports of crime. So I don't know what the number of attempted crimes or crimes reported would tell you about the veracity of a police department. You would look at things like closeout rate and, there's many other metrics you'd look at before the rate of crime. But nonetheless, they had crime stats to look at in the next meeting, and that was forever ago. I guess they're still looking at those crime stats in that committee.
And real quickly, that's Gordon Davis's item, which is I just had it in my head. I wanted to say it out loud. So Gordon Davis, it was 17H. And technically, because of that vote that you talked about, they tried to file it and it failed, that it has to come to the floor. It can't be tabled in the immediacy. And so Mr. Davis brought up that he then engaged with Nico, and Nico said on the floor that, hey, you got to take a vote on this. And they didn't vote on it. And so there's some really weird, strange, charter related issues related to that thing, which, by the way, I'm all for if they want to vote against something. That's fine. But don't bury it. And then now it's an embarrassment, because week after week after week after week, every time we're printing paper, wasting taxpayer dollars, right? And we have to see those agendas all the time when they could just resolve those. By the way, any tabled item can be moved off of the table and brought back onto the agenda at any time by a majority vote, right? A councilor proposes it, they need 6 votes, it comes on there, then they can proceed with it like a normal item, and they could just file it. They could just file it if they wanted to then, if it's been sitting there. Why are they sitting there, Tom, for years and years and years? It's embarrassing. And again, I think this goes back to they just don't have the staff, and they're not set up to do anything, because the Plan E government very much is not about people being involved. It's very much about a charade of government in our city. And that's really too bad, but it's obvious. And I think they get mad at you and me, Tom, because we're pointing these things out.
Yep. Now we're onto a topic I like. They use a range of tactics to avoid voting on things. When somebody wanted to, when a group of people that went out and got 1,500 signatures wanted the city council to resolve that killing children is bad and that the federal government should follow its own laws, they changed the rules inside 36 hours to avoid putting that on the petition and on the agenda, and then only did so under threat of litigation, and then filed it. Wouldn't even give it an up and down vote after they put those people through 3 months of nonsense. But yet, when police union officials, and they have every right to bring the petition, I'm not criticizing them on this issue. They can bring whatever they want to petition the council with, but that it was put on the agenda when their petition literally asked the federal government to break the law, and that was put on the agenda. But but when I ask for city council to hold a public forum on what's true in the DOJ report, the solicitor comes up with nonsense, and it is just nonsense. It makes no sense. Please respect me enough to try when you lie to me. I realize, you're going to lie, but at least try. Like, pay me the respect of, like, coming up with something good. They don't put it on the agenda. Oh, when you wanted to ask the city council to support the findings of the cable commission, they just prevented you from doing so. And this has happened numerous other times. When the city Republican committee brings a resolution to literally require more of naturalized citizens versus natural-born citizens, clearly violating the 14th Amendment.
That was on the agenda.
Yeah, that got on the agenda because I think because they assumed that the city committee could then go to the state committee and maybe they'd have money to sue, right? So what we do is it seems is a lot of times we don't really care about right and wrong. We just do what we can to avoid lawsuits. But then we get involved in lawsuits and we do the dumbest thing possible, like defend lawsuits against releasing records to the public that the records are owned by the public. And we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to delay that, which was just Ed Augustus trying to protect bad cops, which he made a career out of. The list goes on and on. So it's, it looks like, and again, either they don't understand the optics or they just don't care. I think it's probably the latter. But the optics are who you are. It determines if you have access to this council, not what you say.
For sure. And so let me talk about my again, this is our own lived experience a little bit here, Tom. So as Manny and you and I have become more prominent in the local media, right? As we've kind of gained followers and things, all of a sudden people answer the phone a lot more. They answer emails a lot more. There's definitely something to that. Also, I find it interesting that there's definitely a lot of, should I say, offers and opportunity that would take me away from this path that suddenly come my way, right? So like, and just out of nowhere, magic appearing things that I've gone off, off the beaten path, and all of a sudden people are offering me money left and right. And so then I realize either they'll try to buy you off or they'll try to destroy your reputation. There's only really two paths that they'll try to do if you don't agree. And again, not agreeing doesn't mean anything. As Tom mentioned, the ceasefire petition. In my opinion, the most egregious thing is they just didn't let people vote. And just even if they voted against it, that's okay. Vote against it. You're allowed to make a vote. You were elected to vote, and that's okay. I'm completely okay with that. But don't tell the people that you can't put a petition on there, blatantly violating what you just allowed for someone else, and then 2 weeks later allow it for someone else, and then 2 weeks after that allow it for someone else. It just it was literally in their faces. And so I think it goes to that second thing. I think they think that the voting populace of Worcester is stupid and will not see through these things, and that they will just continue to repopulate the city council with the same old. And I'm not talking about asking them to vote for people who are liberal or progressive. I'm not liberal or progressive. I'm not asking for them to vote for people that are on the other the other nonsensical thing. What I'm asking for is the people of Worcester to see and look for logical human beings who make logical decisions about what is happening literally in front of them, which is they feel it's okay to lie to us because they don't think that we care enough to fight back. That's really what it is. They don't care, and so it's hard to say that there's any evidence. And when there is someone who cares and invests, they're excoriated, right? They're just excoriated. So, Councilor Hajiaj, I think that she cares about people. I don't agree with all of her politics. I just don't. But I think she cares about people. And man, does she get hammered from every side. It was her birthday, I think, yesterday or whatever. And I saw that there are people who are on the other side posting things about her on her birthday. It's like, really? Like you can't even give her her birthday. You're gonna go after her on her birthday? Like, what is that, dude? Because she cares about people, and they will excoriate anybody who actually cares about human beings. It doesn't matter about your politics. By the way, you could be a super Christian commando, and if you care about people, you're going down. I'm telling you right now, you are going down, dude. So it doesn't matter like where you're coming from. You're gonna go down. And that's really where it lands for me. And I just wonder for the voters who watch our show, apparently thousands of people every week tune in to watch the This Week in Worcester podcast, which, by the way, will accept sponsors at any time. They are you going to change? Are you going to change? Are you going to vote for the same old, same old? I mean, on your at-large council list this year, you got so many at-large people. We find the list of people to Tuesday. When do we find out
yeah? I mean, you'll see who gets there, right?
Yeah, the 300 signatures are done Tuesday. Tuesday's the last day to file the signatures. Is that right? Am I right about that?
I believe so. I don't remember what the schedule is.
I'm pretty sure it's May 6th. It's definitely this week. So this week, the deadline for filing for signatures, and then we're going to find out. But there's a ton of people that have gotten their signatures already that are brand new, never been involved in city council politics, never been involved in anything. And so, I'm not saying necessarily to vote for them as a slate, but I kind of am. Because I kind of would like to see just a change of the guard, Tom, and just a different approach. Because I think that even though I understand that would expose us potentially to bad experience is better than lifelong Worcester politics experience. Because boy, do we get the same old week after week.
Yeah, I am. I don't know. I'm really torn. People always say, "Well, the solution to this is term limits." And it's like, yeah, you're not wrong, but I'm very torn on term limits. If somebody is voting for somebody they like, why should we tell them they can't? It really comes down to that. I mean, and so, but if you see this in practice, everybody hates Congress, but people by and large, polling wise, like their congressperson. So you hate Congress, you hate a lot of them. But whomever it might be here. Of course, it's Jim McGovern. But I mean, in general, across the country, people generally hate Congress and like their congressperson. Hate the Senate, but like their senator. And so we get people who are there forever. So I don't know. I remain torn on term limits.
So this is not necessarily my argument on term limits. I often wonder if there was a larger group of people participating in the election process, like running for office, if the same people would get returned like they do. I understand what you're saying, that sometimes you want to just let a person, the people vote for who they vote for. But because of the two-party system that we have, we're really only allowed to vote on two people most of the time. In the city council, you can vote on your district plus a slate of 6 people. So there's that. I guess you get to have your choices there. So you do have the opportunity to change it up, but that's really often affected by the amount of money you have to run your campaign. And in the city of Worcester, if you put in $20,000 into your campaign, you get elected. It's that number, that threshold for campaigns for the city council has for years been the indicator of whether or not you get elected or not. And if you go back to the last city council election, you just look down the line and see the people who spent that amount of money. You can kind of generally get the idea of who's going to get there. Every once in a while, there's an exception to that proves the rule. But how many regular people, Tom, have 20 grand to throw at an election?
So it's different for incumbents, though. I mean, so the incumbents we have, some of them have amassed a massive war chest, and barely spend any of it and still win. I don't know if that's necessity, or if it's they don't know how to spend it effectively, and so they don't go on spending sprees, right? But some of our current councils have built up a giant war chest.
Yeah, I will say that, but I also noticed something about some of those people. So George Russell, in deciding not to run again, he has to wind down that account, right? And I noticed that he's been donating some of that money to some of our other running folks. And so I wonder, often, and what does that mean? I don't know how that gets spent. I don't know how it gets tracked exactly. I understand that we have a bureau that's supposed to do that, but what is your take about paid settlements just to shut people up and remember does not prove guilt? That's a whole other tangent. I don't want to go down that road. I doubt very much that the city would pay out a settlement to someone they thought they could beat in court.
Let's hold that for a few minutes. We can get back to that. Let's finish this first.
But anyways, what I'm saying is that I don't know where that money ends up, and I do see that some people have a tremendous amount of money, and it looks like there are some competitive races this year, especially in the district council seat. So it looks like, it looks like Rob has amassed a pretty significant amount of money, and he's gonna, and then Candy's gonna have to spend some money, which she's already started to do. I even heard a rumor the other day about some television commercials potentially for both of those council candidates. So that's going to be interesting to see. But again, I see that number and I just think about how can that work for someone who doesn't make that much money. You have to have another job. And do you have that independent amount of money? It's not easy to raise funds. It's just not. It's a very difficult thing to go on the path of making people give you money. It's difficult, especially you don't have name recognition. You have to rent out venues and there's all kinds of rules. It's really hard for a new person to do that. So I think that's part of the incumbency process, which, there's a whole book called The Power of the Incumbency that's like 60 years old. And that book has proven itself over and over again. Often incumbency, once you win, it's, that's why you can see already in District 3, there's multiple people running for George Russell's seat, because open seats all of a sudden become super competitive, right? Because if you maybe don't have to spend that much, you could win once you get in. Now you're the incumbent. You can see that in same thing in Jenny Pasillo's District 1. We have a bunch of people running for the District 1 seat. So now that sets up, that those are the real races where maybe we could get a surprise result based on passion, motivation, engaged voters. Maybe you could get a different result. That would be interesting to see.
Yeah. Obviously there's some open seats this year in 1 and 3, and then there's one at-large councilor not running again. Yeah. So there'll be some new faces. Do any of the incumbents lose? It could be. There's some races that are absolutely going to be close. I'm not saying this is absolutely going to happen, but it could be a replay of last time too, where it's sweep for the incumbents that are running.
Yeah, that's true too. And then Dr. There's one candidate in the at-large race, is Dr. Mitra, who has a huge amount of money, ton of money that he got in his war chest already, and you haven't heard about him at all. And the reason why is because I think he has a whole new constituency that's probably going to vote for him along cultural lines, which may not have ever happened. I don't know that that's ever happened in our city, and so it could be that's a brand new influence that we haven't seen coming. I don't know how that'll shape or change politics in Worcester if he wins. But there's a real chance that could throw a wrench into the plans of some of the folks that are running right now. Those kind of. And I'm not pushing for him. I'm just saying I saw that he has such a pretty big war chest. On the school committee, there's a couple of seats where people are just running unopposed, which is very interesting. Very interesting.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely, Sean. Name recognition is massive. Especially in Worcester, because it's tough to break through, right? I'm 1050%. That doesn't make any sense. Against for switching to even numbered years. You're competing for more. You're competing with more voices in more, for airtime, if you will. But you know what? You're going to have 30%, 40% higher turnout. Those people will at least take a look at who's running locally if they know that they're on, that they're going to have to fill in some circles. I think most people would look. I think it would be generally, and it'd be a good way to try and get people a little more engaged in, in city politics rather than, all we. And I used to be that person, man. I used to be that person. Now I see it everywhere. Every third at most, or at the least, every third post on, like, you scroll through Facebook or whatever, or Twitter, every third post at the very least is something about Trump. But it's just like, I mean, I get it, but at the same time, the issues aren't as sexy, but they're certainly closer to your life than most of the issues. Not that national politics can't touch your life, but on a more frequent basis.
Yeah, I just don't know that I can't give the airtime to that because I just don't know. Again, and also I agree with a lot of the things about him, and in particular, but it's really hard to parse what's real and what's not.
Right.
I mean, the dude's posting
so much of it
AI Jedi post of himself, and he doesn't realize that he posted a Sith Lord. I mean, is that really what I want to care about? By the way, Happy Star Wars Day to everybody out there. May the 4th be with you.
So let's.
I have Star Wars socks on. You don't want to see them?
I don't.
That's whack.
Allow me to keep some respect for you. We had a question that we'll address, and then we'll get those last two topics real quick. Our friend Fred and Nathan, paid settlements just to shut people up, and remember does not prove guilt. Okay, so there is no shutting people, at least related to law enforcement. As of 2021, the State House passed a law that confidentiality agreements can only be in civil settlements related to law enforcement if it is requested in writing by the plaintiff in the case. So the person that is suing in this case, the city, and this only applies to municipalities, of course. The person that's suing the city has to, if they want a confidentiality agreement, they have to request so in writing. The city can't force it upon them. That's as of 2021. Prior to that, this city just loved confidentiality agreements because why we want to hear from those people. They only have lived experience that may inform us about policy, but everybody knows everything that they need to know already, and that is everything the police does is absolutely correct. So, and if they do it, that should make it then legal. That is the perspective of a whole bunch of people in the city. But we should be hearing, and to those who are under confidentiality agreements from before that, I think you said this too. I called for it in city council. Release those people unilaterally. If those people want to speak, they should be allowed to, and we should be listening because they have the lived experience. But of course, this is not about achieving the best policy ends. It is about, I don't even know what, ensuring that the police department, I don't know, cannot take criticism or something. I don't even know what it's about, really. It's so dysfunctional. It's just a stupid strategy that they've rolled out. And I do believe it's a strategy. I'll give them that much credit. I do believe this is absolutely a strategy. And they don't see it falling apart in front of their face. But so there is no really shutting up anybody in these lawsuits anymore. Yes, there is an aspect of that's often cheaper, right? Defending litigation is extremely expensive. They typically use outside private attorneys for this stuff, so it's not typically not the solicitor that's doing that anymore. And so there can be good reason to settle. But, specifically related to the police department, when you look at just the last 4 years of Sergeant's tenure, the city settled 14 lawsuits related to civil rights violations by the police department. And, of course, as Fred said, they never admitted guilt. Well, yeah, I mean, that's typical. That's what you're paying for, part of what you're paying for. But with 14 settlements just coming in the last 4 years, and lawsuits from that time are still ongoing. Remember, Cosenza is actually from before that, and the pastor is from the days of Sergeant. The Main Street protests, whatever the hell the police department was thinking that night, that's from 2020. That was Sergeant and Augustus was the city manager. So the lawsuits from that aren't even over yet. And then when you look and see that the internal investigation of the police department over the 9 years that Sergeant was chief, never found an instance, not one instance of unreasonable force. It's just not credible. Like, they can settle they can say that they haven't admitted any guilt all they want. When you settle 14 lawsuits in 4 years, and 5 years, I think it was 5 years. The report was the report that was given to. I got this from a report that was given to City Council in 2023. 14 lawsuits in 4 or 5 years settled, and then that was the final 5 or 4 years, I forget what it was, of his 9-year tenure. And during his 9-year tenure, there was 0 instances that the police department decided that one of its own had used unreasonable force, even though we saw them on video. Right. So there's a lot of what I'd say is there's a lot of factors. That they don't admit guilt is wholly irrelevant to me, because we see it, we've seen it.
Yeah, so they don't admit guilt, but they admit that taxpayer dollars are worth settling the suit for. That to me is the issue that we should be talking about in the politics. Like, they just took money, and they're short money. And if you total up all those lawsuits, by the way, it equals more than the federal government took away from Worcester Public Schools this year. Right. So like we're just paying out lawsuits, and we're asking for oversight related to those lawsuits. I don't think that is a difficult question to answer. And when city councilors say, well, no, we don't want to look into that, or we're gonna have, we're just gonna deal with the results, or then the excuse that it's easy to sue. No, it's not. It is not easy to sue. It is very difficult to sue. You have to get an attorney that's willing to do it, one, and there are very few that are willing to do it. You have to pay that attorney. And usually, most attorneys, when suing municipalities, there's a very small group of people who do that. They weigh out whether there's going to be a result.
Yep.
Right. And if you lose, how are you going to pay that? Unless you're independently wealthy, how do you pay that? I don't know. I think that. Yeah.
Sorry. No, this goes back to the chief said in front of city council a few weeks ago that there is there are officers in the Worcester Police Department on the Brady list. The Brady list is a phrase for a list of people that, and then every DA across the country has them, including in Worcester County. And it's a list of police officers that are known to lie on either incident reports or in court or whatever. And they will not put those cops in front of a jury, because the defense will shred them. So when you know that, and we see these instances where, the Cosenza case, civil jury found that up to one Worcester police officer fabricated evidence and manipulated evidence, and the second officer conspired with him to do so. In the beer garden situation, very clearly, that officer pressed charges on Chris Ayala Melendez for things that he did not do, and we would not know that if it weren't for a surveillance video that they did not know was there at the time. And so when you see things like that, you should be. You either live on planet Zoron, and you think that we know only the times that this happened. We know all the times that this happened. It was a very isolated. It never happened before. Or these are the times that we know about. And how many times has this happened to somebody who lives in a household, for example, that is at or near, at or near the median household income. I say it all the time. It is median household income in the city of Worcester is 52nd of 59 cities in the state. So you're talking about generally people that are not wealthy, and how many of them have relied on a public defender who's overloaded, handling a billion cases at once, and have copped a plea for a thing they did not do, so that the penalty for the thing that they didn't do wasn't worse. And therein is the real injustice in all of this. And I'm going to start laying that out. And I'm sure people are going to be really thrilled about it. And sorry that the truth hurt your feelings. Sorry that the truth hurt your feelings.
Wait till you look at the funding levels for the Worcester County Public Defender's Office, which, by the way, has been cut multiple times, regardless of the economic status of the state. They consistently find ways to cut that department on a regular basis while requiring heavier and heavier and heavier caseloads. So often, you'll see situations at the new courthouse where they basically have a room where there's a piece of plastic, and there's a bunch of little places for people to talk through, and a client lawyer confidential conversation is taking place through this little thing in front of the other 15 or 20 inmates that are in there. And of course, none of those inmates are in there to listen in on those conversations, right, Tom? So there's a bunch of there's this constant pressure for those folks to be found guilty. And the only time they ever change that is when there is a capital case, when they have to be careful. They have to do things in a certain way, so they can't get away with that stuff so much because there's a higher visibility. Again, we're trying to put visibility on a lot of that stuff. Those are the kind of things where you create unfairness in the city. There's a thought that came to me, by the way. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and it came to me about the data that the chief is talking about, specifically crime statistics and a lot of those things that they use to do it. And I went and I looked at ShotSpotter's data collection tool that they use, that we're currently using. And one of the things I noticed, Tom, is that they do not collect data for crimes outside of the range. They do not. So they don't have a comparative a sample set to compare to. And the other thing is that those crime models that they tell us where all the crimes take place, they do not involve white collar crimes, right? So you don't know the addresses where said crimes took place. Now, of course, if someone was working for, I don't know, Merrill Lynch, and they're doing some manipulative thing with a hedge fund, right? Obviously, that manipulation would be at the address of the place where the hedge fund is, I guess. But again, is that guy working from home at an address on the west side? I don't know. So we don't know about that data anyways, because they only are showing us one group of data that's really related to economic disparity, not necessarily prevalence of crime, right? Because there are specific types of crime that are related intensely to economic disparity. And so that underlying bias is what underlies the entire data collection system. So I appreciate the clarity that the chief has expressed on wanting to collect data more clearly. However, the underlying assumptions are fatally flawed. And so there's no way to know for sure that that's the way to do it. And so then those things too affect dramatically how decisions and policies are made. And that's kind of not fair. Again, it's really striking. I posted a video really quickly about the Elm Park playground thing. And I'm trying to do that every week. I'm going to go down there a couple times and just kind of see the progress of the Elm Park playground thing, because Councilor Presidio brought it up. I received pushback from a man who's a cousin of one of the contractors, which I just took a couple steps to figure that out. So of course, and he thought I was accusing the contractors of doing something wrong. And all I was doing was showing the progress of the construction project in the city of Worcester, which has a history of saying if something's going to finish on X day and it not happening. Case study number one, Kelly Square, Polar Park, all of the projects around there, not one of them has been built by the day they originally said that they would be built by, right? They've all failed to meet their deadlines. And so I'm thinking that if I show that, maybe that'll put some pressure somewhere for someone to do something. That's just Elm Park. Elm Park is in a pretty decent, like a higher median salary neighborhood, right? But I don't know that the same thing happens in other neighborhoods that don't have it. They don't get the same kind of opportunity to have things viewed. In this case, Councilor Pasillo happened to be in Elm Park for the new trees, and a constituent came up and brought this issue to her, and so she put an order on the thing. But I don't know that everybody thinks to do that with their city council, right?
Right.
The software, the software, of course, is going to be massively expensive. So that's always,
I mean, that's already been approved to be paid for. I mean, look, I'm happy they're doing it. I've been eternally frustrated by some of the things that I've asked for that should be easy asks, and I mean, I'm given the number of conversations I've had about it with multiple people. I'm convinced that it's just they just can't. They would have to pull the data manually. It would be manually extracted, as in reading and data entering. And of course, they're not going to do that. Nor should they. Nor should they have to. So I am happy that they're doing this, and they're putting everything. It's such a part of the reason why it's such a long process is because they're doing everything in the past as well. So that will be able to hopefully get data, you would think that they'd be able to produce. And I know that there's a lot of frustration internally about it too, because, if they could pull this data and make it public, it would probably benefit them in some cases.
Put that on there. Put that on there. I want that comment up there. I hope.
Yes, I'm sure they do know how to use Excel, but when you're dealing with 100 years of data, and you ask for something like that comment is epic. Well, like when I forget what it was, it's like 80s, I think. I'm gonna go take a guess. I don't remember if this is the case, but it was like 80s-ish that the software that they now use was installed, and they're still sitting on it, much like a charter. Both make no sense.
I'm all for better data collection. I'm not against the data collection. What I'm saying is that the fields which they aim to collect, some of the fields have underlying issues with how they're processed. And so that becomes an issue of policy. Like, how do we view this data? Why do we give this value more important than this value, right? And it goes back to the conversation on whether or not you review someone's record when they file a complaint. To me, if someone comes to the police department and sits down and files a complaint, you just take the complaint. You don't review the veracity of the complainer. And for the purpose of, if I was thinking about, I want to make sure that no one's going to get in trouble in the police department, I would just investigate everything to the ends of the earth and use the investigation to show, hey, look, we did it. Not, hey, we didn't even do it because we decided to accuse the person of something that they did years ago, and we qualified their ability to file the complaint based on their personal record, which I just don't understand. That it doesn't make any sense. And so that's what I'm saying, is that those fields that they choose to collect, they themselves are the issue, not necessarily whatever version of the software that they're getting, which, by the way, fundamentally, to answer Sean's question, almost all of those softwares are based on the original code that Excel runs on. Almost all of them are just super spreadsheets. Super duper. Yes.
No, they're absolutely not.
So when you're 100% wrong, and I can 100% prove that if we really have to.
So Excel is just a relational database? That's what you're saying. It's a relational
database. That's it. That's all Excel really is.
Okay. Excel is not a relational database. First of all.
Okay, all right, whatever. You can say whatever you want. It's literally a graph-based database, right? You have a column and you have a row. All of those softwares are columns and rows. It's the same fundamental process.
Every website, in that sense, every website is just columns and rows because everything's stored in a database, which has fields.
Sure. Almost all modern software is based on the same general concepts. But Microsoft Access, which definitively is part of the process, is just super Excel. That's all it is. It's just a super Excel, and that's what the access database management, right? That's the
Yeah,
original
yeah.
coding. It led to a lot of these processes. In fact, the one they use now is based on access, and part of their problem is that they have
Which
other
would have
devices.
been appropriate in 1985, and it hasn't been
Sure,
appropriate for
sure. I'm
20
not
years.
saying that it's not appropriate. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying it's the same fundamental technology. It's just that they've souped it up and made it easier to use, where they have an officer on in the field making a tablet click, go like this. And part of the issue is that a lot of those softwares are Apple-based software, which is a different concept from the Microsoft or the DOS-based programming, right? Those are completely different languages, and so they're having a lot of trouble making them, compliant with each other, because officers use different devices. Which I've always said, I'm not necessarily anti-Apple or anti-Microsoft. What I am is mixed device technology is always difficult. So if you're going to have a police department, they should all be on the same tech, and at least that they talk to each other well. And so if there's one program that's not linked into the other tech, then now you're going to have an issue with how you collect the data. So like, I don't want an officer making that decision in the field, is what I'm trying to say. Like, I really don't want them determining, should I click on this or click? No. Just whatever they have should be easy to use and simplified. And I don't know necessarily about this software if that's the case. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
To avoid this getting super nerdy, we're going to move on. But today we learned John doesn't know how software works.
Okay. You're dead wrong, but it's okay. It's okay. It's so bad. It's so bad.
Just no.
There's so much here that we could go. I would love to do a nerd out show. Let's do it, bro.
I will say that my conclusion from this is I don't believe the city has a single data scientist on staff, and
100%. They do not. Look at the website. And I'm not blaming,
don't.
by the way, I'm
I don't even
not
wanna go there.
blaming the chief technology officer for the city. It's not their fault. They hired a firm to redesign the website and managed to actually deliver a worse website. And
It's
now,
horrific.
they're getting complaints. Every single city councilor I've spoken to, every person in the administration I've talked to, they are getting constant complaints from everybody. The real estate, they did this separation where now when a real estate agent needs to pull permits, or like when they're talking to a person, they have to go to two different places to find the electric permits versus the plumbing permits, right? Everything is separate into all these other little buckets, and it doesn't interact the way that it used to. Because when you used to just look up an address, everything was listed on there, everything, right? And they took that away. Why? I have no idea. It makes no sense. But that's because of what you just said. The chief technology officer for the city is literally the only guy. He's literally the only guy. He's got two staffers, but none of them have data management backgrounds. So like, you're forcing the city to go outside to get that. That should be an internal department, but they don't know how to hire that department. I don't think they do. And the guy who's the CTO, he's actually a good dude. He's very responsive. He talks to everybody, and he tried his best to implement it, but they forced him to go with an outside contractor. It's not his fault. It's the contractor's fault for sure in this situation. And the website is horrible.
I mean, I just they didn't even do anything, and the things they did were dumb. I mean, I'm going to go on another tangent. The typography is all screwed up. It's like, great, you designed it for mobile, but there are people in the world, probably 30%, 40% of your users that use desktop, and when they go look at the calendar, they get letters this big.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sean mentioned that someone was trying to get the new permit. Now, the new gathering permit process is actually super simplified, but to get to the page where you get the permit, it's like 37 steps. And that's like, why did you simplify the process just to make the website more difficult? It doesn't make any sense. Not only that, the public, have you tried that? I mean, I know you do, and I do, the public records request thing. It used to be one button, and I was there, and I could fill out the form and flip it through. But now I got to go site to site to site. And then the police one is separate now from I got to go to two different places. And it's like,
it's always been like that, because it's always been like that.
No, but I'm saying at least I could click on that first page, and it would then ask me in that page, do you want to do a police one or you want to do a regular public record search? That's what I'm saying. Is like, now to navigate there, I have to navigate differently than it used to be. Of course, Natalie, we found someone who likes the new website. So there you go. We have
Horrific.
all perspectives here on this.
I don't even know, like, I don't even like know what's improved. Like there was like all they did was change around some of the way like data is presented, and they just did it dumber.
And to me, they just made it more complicated for no reason. That's my personal opinion.
That was a tangent. Yeah, it's bad. It is, and it is no more user friendly. Like no user friendly improvement. No UI improvements. The UX is the same. I mean, it's just I could go on forever. The typography pisses me off because it just looks ridiculous.
Yeah, why is that font is the one they're using? I don't understand the font choice. Just use Helvetica. Everybody likes Helvetica. It's a non-controversial font. Everything in Helvetica.
I don't know.
Or Times New Roman, something. But oh my goodness,
it's not fun and it's not funny. Moving on. I don't know how trash went back to cops and then to the website and then I don't know. But chickens. This is again. You led the push on the agenda today. So you go.
Chickens. So on Tuesday, the planning board shifted the petition from I forget the guy's name. But anyways, his petition is now back before the city council, and the Vatican. Man, Sean be killing me sometimes. So the petition for chickens, hens only, guys and girls, hens only, able to lay eggs only, has been sent by the planning board back to the city council with a recommendation that it be sent to economic development. Okay. So that's an interesting choice. And the idea is that economic development is where someone could come and propose language for an ordinance. So I've talked with multiple city councilors about this now, and there is a very small one-page ordinance in the city of Boston that is being used right now, and it has it coupled with it a one-page application that would allow people to have chickens. The issue that seems to be the problem is Councilor Bergman and Russell, who are adamantly against the chickens. They don't want any chickens in the Councilor Russell in some of the neighborhoods in District 3, and Councilor Bergman apparently in anybody on the west side, because that's apparently who complains about the chickens. So the planning boards has sent a very well-crafted response to the city council, hopefully sending it to economic development where those issues can be dealt with, and it should be done with speed. There's no reason for this to have lasted as long as it has, but because two councilors have made it their pet issue to destroy and stop people from having chickens, we are where we are. And it doesn't make any sense. And I've already gone and waxed on about 150, 71 cities and towns in Massachusetts have some form of chickens. Technically, it's a right to farm state, so there is really no prevention for you. There can only be complaint-based prevention. So that means if somebody shows up at your house, Tom, and says, hey, I don't like Tom's chickens, they can complain about you, and then the inspection services, as Nathalie is asking it right now, how are they going to deal with the chickens? It's a very simple process. It's really not that difficult to deal with. It involves coops being up off the ground. It's really not that hard to do. We've been doing it for thousands of years. We can figure out how to do chickens. The fact that the city, it makes our city look ridiculous that we don't have a simple policy for chickens. It's just so simply. We do have a rat problem, but chickens don't attract rats. This is a scientific fact. The feed attracts rats. It's the feed, and it's a particular chemical in the feed that is used. And so all you do there is you do exactly what Boston, Springfield, Brockton, Hartford, Manchester, Portland, Maine, Augusta, Maine, all these other cities have done. And you ban the pesticide-based feed. And then you know what happens? No more rats. It's really that simple. There's a certain kind of feed that is used prevalently in all the country that attracts rats. And so what you do is don't use that feed and you won't have the issue. Pretty simple. Basic, simple science. Chicken. I'm for the chickens.
Yeah, let people have eggs, for the love of God. The real question is did they just send this back to the planning board and do another round of this nonsense that they've done 3 times now?
This is now 3 times that they've sent it to the planning board, and it is not in the jurisdiction of the planning board. I intend to bring that up again to show, again, our city council literally doesn't know how to operate their own charter, and it's a game they're playing with the citizens of Worcester, that they're basically saying to you that you're stupid. And this is squarely on the backs of Councilor Russell and Councilor Bergman, who have been going at this thing because they have constituents who don't want chickens. It has nothing to do with a majority of voters in the city of Worcester. It is literally a small group of people creating a policy that makes no sense. And George says, I need to see more studies on this and that. There's 71 cities and towns in Massachusetts that have already handled this, and the rest of them just don't have a written policy. We should have a basic policy. It's simple, it's easy to do. Oh my goodness, it's so frustrating. Goats! I want goats too. I want my own goats.
Yeah, I mean, since food's so cheap these days, well, why not prevent people from raising their own chickens and having eggs? That makes total sense. And lastly, you want to touch on some conversation at City Council last week about schools are renting space to churches, and people are really upset.
All right, so that's fine, Nathalie. You don't have to have chickens. The planning board is going to deal with density-related issues. It's not that difficult a process. So the Councilor Russell had another order on there, and apparently somebody in his district, apparently District 3, has got a lot of people complaining, sent him a flyer, and in the flyer it had a church which meets at Worcester Tech. Okay, or Voc, however you refer to it. I call it Tech. I've always called it Tech. Anyways, the vocational technical school that we've all come to know and love. And that church was meeting on a Sunday, and they have an address on the flyer for Worcester Tech, and the church meets in the gymnasium. It's in the auditorium. I'm sorry, not the gymnasium. Okay, and so Councilor Russell went into this whole thing. The city's attorney had to come down and explain about liability and all this other stuff. And then in the end, Mayor Petty came down, and Mayor Petty said what most of the people who live in the city of Worcester know. That church and other churches has been meeting in Worcester Tech for decades. Literally decades. And it is literally a way that we earn money for our schools independently of the state money that can be cut at any time and the federal money that can be cut anytime. We use the facilities and we rent them out, not just the churches, but the facilities have been rented out to plays, concerts, traveling groups, they've trainings, all kinds of things to generate additional income. That income, when it's generated by the school itself, cannot be touched by the state. It cannot be touched by the feds, and it can't go into the general fund of the city. It only goes to the facility itself. This is run by the principals of the school. It's part of why you have a principal. They're hired in part to raise money for the school. This is a good thing. It is not a bad thing. And I get it, religion, and people want to get upset about it, but there's just as many different religions that are renting schools in the city. If you remember, when they built Doherty and they were at one of the city council meetings, they were talking about the position, and Tom and I talked about this before the show. With the school department, there's a person who makes about $50,000 a year. It is their job to coordinate all the rentals in the city, help set rates, help develop the contract, and there is a simple contract. So they were saying that this is the thing. So George Russell then said on the floor, I don't know if this is an issue of separation between church and state. Oh my goodness. Just a fundamental misunderstanding of that concept in general. But a church can rent a school. It doesn't mean that now the school is an endorsement of the religion. It just means they're endorsing that the schools need to raise their own funds because we don't fund schools correctly in this country. We just don't. And so now we're forcing our schools to do stuff like this. And there are some churches that have actually made it the way that they do run their organization is that they rent out schools. If you look at the policy, and you can go look it up, it actually is available online. The church, there actually, that's happened, Sean. There's been a Church of Satan that's rented out a couple of municipal facilities. It was a big controversy, like, I don't know, like 9 or 10 years ago. It made the news, and it kind of went the way. There's also the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. If you want to look that up, that's a real thing, and they've rented out facilities in the past as well. Then there's been a bunch of other kind of organizations, not just churches, that do this. The point is that Councilor Russell approached this as if he didn't know. And it blows my mind, because I believe that it's possible he doesn't know. And that is embarrassing for the city of Worcester, to have our officials not know what our not just our new policy, Tom, a multiple decade policy. But he wasn't the only one. Councilor Calorio, for the only time she spoke during the thing, she raised up and said she wanted to join in on this petition and ask why. South High gets rented all the time, mostly by performing arts groups. Sean, to answer that question, the principals at South High have done a good job of getting performance artists to come and rent out that place. They have a tremendous program over there. There's actually a group called Studio Theater Worcester, which is run by John Summers. They used to rent Worcester Academy a lot, and they often rent out South. And I think they're working on a program to rent out Doherty. They bring a lot of tickets, and they bring money to the schools that they rent them out of. Check out Studio Theater Worcester. That's one of the places. And then there's another one through the Village, which does a drum-based program, which has rented out a couple of the elementary schools. Again, a tremendous program. We should be supporting these people renting out our school facilities on the weekends. By the way, there's nobody there. There's nobody there. And as the mayor said, the schools are making money off of this, significant money, and it just really blows my mind that we have counselors not know this. So I'm probably getting too close to attacking people personally, but it's just very frustrating to have this be an issue when we have much more significant issues to deal with on a weekly basis. Also, I have a correction real quick, a clarification to make after we finish about the fire department. And I'll wait until you deal with all that I just said.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about this during budget time last year. The three who vote against everything on the school committee made a big deal about this one person making $50K, who was coordinating this at the district level, so that they were funding that rather than lay this person off who was already in this job, already hired. They funded that through the fees from rentals. And these three went absolutely ballistic. Oh my God, fire this person, because it wasn't done that way in the past, because everything that was done in the past was so wonderful, like throwing as many kids as possible out of school. That was wonderful. Brian Allen, who just last week, or this past week, was named the next next superintendent of schools. During the budget process, of course, that was well before that happened. And he said that they did a survey of surrounding communities, and Worcester schools were way overpriced for rentals, and that's why they had so few. That's why they had so few of them. And that's a personal experience. This was Old South. This was before South was rebuilt. I did a couple rentals there of their gymnasium, and nothing worked. The scoreboard was, you had to have an advanced aero and astronautics degree to get this thing to work. And what they charged me was insane.
And the new process is they've reduced the prices, and all of a sudden people are renting out all of the things. But you know what, Tom? The individual principals were the ones doing that. The Worcester Tech, that the church that meets at Worcester Tech, has been meeting at Worcester Tech basically since time immemorial.
I remember this was a budget that was getting cut by whatever it was, $12 million, something. Laid a bunch of people off, whatever. And so they're trying to have some district level coordination of this rental process. And of course the three went crazy and tried to have this person fired. Carried on about this forever. Because I don't know what you're going to do at 50. What, laying this person off rather than funding it through fees so it's not coming off the budget. It seemed like a very common sense thing to do. But of course,
I just, I want to amplify what you're saying right there. This person that does this job is paid for by the rental fees that the schools generate. That
they
means
wanted
that
to fire though.
Huh?
But 3 people wanted to fire because that's not the way it was done before. And anything that's different than when it was done before is wrong. Because
by the way,
was
that means it's
thriving under that leadership.
It saved $50,000. Like that, like, don't we want these kind of things? And again, if you go look at Doherty, man, Manny and I did the tour for Doherty. It's a beautiful facility, right? And again, I'm hopeful Burncoat is just engaging in that process, or they just got approved for the planning board, whatever the version of it is. That's the next stage.
They got approved for the feasibility study, which is the first
feasibility study, right?
Yeah, you can't move forward with any construction without this.
Yeah, but of course, Burncoat sorely needs to be replaced. We all know that. Everybody's been saying that for. By the way, Mayor Petty said in his speech that he feels like he fulfilled his promises that he made in his original thing. Burncoat needed to be fixed 20 years before Mayor Petty ran for council. Let's just say this thing was built in 1953, and it was a post World War II. Single floor is never designed to last as long as it has, and the poor kids that have to go to that school. But anyways, long story short, and I'm pro Burncoat too. You guys kick butt. I'll go Burncoat. But the Doherty facility is amazing. And part of what they said when they built Doherty, that they were building a facility very similar to South, but they were designing it to attract rental income, which is genius when you have a school budget that fluctuates based on what the state is feeling that year.
Or they make you, or they try to raise standards but don't put in an inflation fix.
Yeah.
So it screws
Why wouldn't you want this? It's just silly nonsense. And yes, I get it. You're uncomfortable with religion. Fine, but it's not an endorsement of religion. Those religions, by the way, have money. Let them pay it to the school department, and then we'll use it to make the school department better. Let's go.
I just want to touch on one other thing. Look, he can take whatever position he wants. I happen to disagree, but Councilor Bergman, who I like very much, said during the chief's testimony there, he asked some questions about post, and then said he wouldn't support any additional oversight of the police department. And this is something that I've heard other people say, and I just want to make this point about that. And you'll hear me say this again, I'm sure. What we absolutely should not do is, first of all, investigations of officer misconduct when it is related to civil rights violations, excessive force, things in contact with the public, like insubordination stuff. I don't really care what they do with that. But things that are public facing and affect members of the public should not be investigated at all internally, first of all. But besides that, what we absolutely cannot and should not do is subject the additional oversight of the police department to whatever the Speaker of the House in Boston decides to do that year. Because despite all of our elections for House representatives to go to the House at the state level, the Speaker of the House is basically, and it's not just the Speaker of the House, it is forever, is basically a dictator, and nothing happens without his approval. You can see this. There was a big debate about the rules a couple of years ago, and they recorded his vote wrong, and when they changed it, like 75 votes changed with it instantly. You can see it happen live on the board they have there. So that's how that place is run, and we should absolutely not subject ourselves to subject the veracity of the oversight of the police department to whatever they decide in Boston, because one, it's maybe the worst legislature in the country. It's certainly one of the least productive, and especially the House. The Senate is got its act together a little bit in the last 6 or 8 years, a little bit. It is certainly the more transparent, transparent House of the state Congress, but the House is a disaster, and we should absolutely not subject ourselves to we should not outsource one, which is basically what we're talking about. relying on a state system, and two, subject to whatever the state decides to fund it. Because as soon as it becomes cool to defund that, they're going to do that because they don't want that to work. It's just like we have here. We don't want, our politicians, by and large, at least a slim majority, don't want oversight of the police department. They won't want anything to change especially because it's election year.
Now, interestingly enough, real quick, the Post Commission only gets involved when it's certified by the police department in charge, right? Is that correct? They only get involved.
No. So within 48 hours, or within 2 days of the police department receiving a complaint, that complaint has to be sent to Post. So they're kind of overseeing the whole thing. There was a community meeting here at the YWCA 2 months ago, maybe, and I have been extraordinarily dubious of this commission having really any use whatsoever. In hindsight, I was probably a bit tough on them on how big a job it was to get certifications out to every police officer in the state. It took a lot of resources and a lot of time. And but the executive director was at this meeting, and I forget his title, but he was basically the person that is the top of their investigations piece. Impressive, very, very, very serious people. It was wonderful to see. But again, they are subject to what the State House does on funding. And they have a big job.
If I remember correctly, you told me about a lot of this stuff. One of the things that the commission has mentioned is that they don't have the staffing to cover all the cities and towns in Massachusetts, which I should have this like ready to go, but I have.
So there's two problems, right? So they kind of oversee. They get the results of every investigation done internally. There's a response to a complaint at least. And then individuals can also file directly with Post, and then Post sends the complaint to the police department to do their thing, and then they review it. So
there's 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts.
Correct.
So just real quick, I also have this other number. There's 19,578 sworn police officers. That doesn't include the state police. That's just the municipal police officers, 19,000. And so that's that was in 2024. That's a massive amount of people to review on a regular basis. And so how many people are on the Post Commission staff that are doing all those reviews? That's more than if you think about it, if you just divide it by 300, you're looking at 50, 60 reviews a day. Is there an ability to truly process in depth what we would want our officers to be certified for, right? Like if you're reviewing an officer, you would want an in-depth review, not just for the people accusing them, but for the officer themselves to be able to operate as a sworn officer correctly, right? So to me, again, the resources that's pushing off onto an already overburdened and probably underutilized commission, right? Definitely underpowered for sure. Commission, what should be done at the local level, and again, the civilian review board is not necessarily going to be able to issue indictments. That's not what people are saying here. It just might be able to compel someone to come in and speak truthfully. That's it. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing, because is it bad to have people tell the truth? I don't know, Tom. What do you think?
So, no. I mean, and right now there's nothing that compels the police officer to tell the truth to an internal investigation. And the what am I looking for? I don't want to say the L word. The misstatements of truth that are made in these internal investigations. I mean, they're just. In some of these Bob's reports, they're just glaring because they have to put at least what the person said.
I got a new phrase though. I got a new phrase for you. I call it an alternative recollection of a situation.
There you go. Alternative facts. I would just put that on folks' radar. That I know that he's not the only person in council that feels similarly, and the police unions don't want civilian review, and so that's not going to happen. And another thing, we're waiting on a report from the Worcester Regional Research Bureau. They do great work. They write good reports. They do great research. There's stuff we know that we probably wouldn't have known if they hadn't done it. But just the appearance on its face of the city manager has now farmed this out to the Research Bureau, and the Research Bureau is again this year sponsoring, or seems to be the presenting sponsor, or appear, of the city manager's State of the City address. Do we not like? It's obvious what that looks like, and then and that they don't care is stunning.
I mean, you and I have gone over this a bunch of times. I just don't know how to. Again, these appearances of impropriety are just mind-numbing. I just don't know how to. And when you bring it up, and I have brought it up, I receive blank stares, as if I'm saying something that I'm speaking in entirely not just another language, but a language that has never before been heard.
How dare you?
It's the language of Mordor, something that should not be uttered in these hallowed hills of Worcester. We shouldn't be talking the dark tongue, because we're bringing up these legitimately simple,
plainly obvious contradictions right on it, but sticking it in our face, daring us to mention it, and then we mention it in the guys. That's not a shot at the Research Bureau. Again, they do great work, but it surely doesn't look good. And all due respect to many, many people throughout the city who have been fighting like hell to get to a civilian review board. Much respect. I just disagree. There's very, very few examples of these things being effective, because they're designed to not be effective. They, in most cases, for example, in Hartford, civilian review board writes reports. They go to the chief, and the chief takes them, and they go on the round file, and that's the end of that. And then we move on to the next one. And that's exactly what we don't need. We don't need more performances. We need stuff that works.
And we already have an example of one commission in the Human Rights Commission, and a second example when I was on the Cable Television Advisory Committee, of two volunteer boards who gave information to the city that was legitimate, was well researched, was significantly documented, was backed up with all the facts. And what ended up happening to those committees? I mean, obviously the Cable Television Advisory Committee is still defunct because they haven't been able to find anybody. And I get complaints every single Tuesday from one city councilor who always says it's my fault that no one will join the Cable Television Advisory Committee. But why would they when they just denied our work? And then the Human Rights Commission, which has just been assailed constantly by the city manager in the media almost monthly now for a year. He's made public statements. He's gone on Hank Stolz's show. He did it on Spectrum. He did it on Mass Live. He does it on the city floor all the time. He's hammering the Human Rights Commission, has been and going after them for more than a year. So why would anybody want to even join a civilian review board, even if it had the power? Because it looks like the city will just hammer somebody who goes against them. Again, it goes back to our initial thing. You and I are doing basic oversight with our media presence, and so is Bill over at Worcester Sucks, and so is Brad at the TNG. He's done some pretty good oversight, and we're getting hammered left and right. So why would anybody want a civilian review board? Say again?
Yeah, because we won't get on that talking points. I will be happy to answer that question, Natalie, in just 1 second. I have a column. It just came out a few days ago. It is called "A Cult of Silence" and the Cult of Silence in Gaslight City, which I'm so proud. I am proud of the headline because it's hilarious, but it also happens to be true.
Gaslight City, baby.
And I would say about half of that piece, it's a pretty long piece, but about half of it really lays out. I got some emails through a public records request. It really lays out as we're getting closer to about the time we would have expected the DOJ report, right? Because these take about 2 years. Learned that from a Worcester Regional Research Bureau paper that they did when this was first announced. They take about 2 years, and you can see them through the emails as it's the chair of the committee getting instructions from the staff handler, which is the director of, I forget, inside the DEI division. And they're just tightening as we get closer. It's tightening the noose, and then after the report comes out, they just yank on the noose, just trying to control everything. Right around the time the report was released, suddenly they went from you can only have your meetings can't go more than 3 hours, and they can't go more than 2 hours. Suddenly it was, I know that we've done this for the Human Rights Commission forever, but we will no longer have links to the documents on your agenda. So those crazy. Documents will only be, and the way they framed it was, and once they're introduced in the meeting, then they become public records subject to public records requests. So if you don't, if you know anything about the Mass Public Records Law, it's bad, and you have to know fairly precisely what you're looking for to actually have the request be valid. And then there's a waiting period, and then the department is, I believe, it certainly is understaffed. There's no question about that. I believe intentionally so. And so, you get delays. Those people in that department work extraordinarily hard and get their butts kicked every day. So it's not on them, but there's just not enough bandwidth in that effort. And so, once you get into this, we're not going to release stuff, but you can public records request it. It's just another burden to get information, and it's a very convenient burden for any municipality or state agency, and that's why the law was written that way, because that's what it was intended to do. It's certainly better than what the public records law was before the current law. It's not good. What do I suggest, Natalie? Well, I have thoughts. I believe that
he can't give all the thoughts right now because we are 2 hours and 15 minutes into the show, and it'll take way too long.
It would. In short, we need oversight in the military, in the United States military, is fairly effective. We're not talking about policy decisions. We're talking about rank and file stuff that happens rank and file. And it is effective because they use an inspector general system, where it is a member of the military that is not a member of that branch. It is, I don't actually know what they're attached to. I think they're attached to executive branch stuff. But it is literally outside the military who does these investigations, right? Looks at and does oversight work. Every agency, including the intelligence agencies, have them at the federal level. Florida, of all places, makes heavy use of inspector generals at the state level. And there are some cities, most notably Chicago, whose inspector general, from looking from afar, obviously they don't follow Chicago very well, but it appears is actually quite influential. Like when they, investigate something and write papers on matters of policy or matters of operations, it seems to be taken very seriously there. But I mean, the key thing about the inspector general is they are independent. There are only certain criteria which they could be removed, so they're protected from being arbitrarily fired. And and there's some other mechanisms that are used to keep them as independent as you could possibly imagine. So they are free to act without they are free to pursue investigations and such, without retribution. That's why it was one of the first things our dear president did was fire a bunch of inspector generals this year when after inauguration, because he's losing oversight, battle. Right?
He's losing that battle.
Yes, he is. And so I think we should do that here. I think that there should be not just review of internal investigations of the police department. We should have our inspector general as the official fact finder for internal investigations in Worcester. I have the same problem.
Tom's saying for every department, not just the police.
Yes.
He's saying the whole city.
Oh no. Right. This person would have unfettered access to every document that the city owns, is in control of, and would not only be, of course, working on police misconduct investigations, but the typical phrase they'd be looking for waste, fraud, and abuse, and failures of policy, and would write reports that are public. So it would be kind of the investigator, the independent investigator inside government. It's long been done at the federal level. It's been done at other levels. It works. And so, I have the same issue, although, it's much newer and doesn't have much of a track record at all to pick at. But I mean, the city manager began an investigations team which ironically ended up being stuck in as the official investigative arm. If the Human Rights Commission were to do an investigation, the only investigators they're allowed to use are people that report directly to the city manager. And that is not independence. That is not transparent. That is, Worcester Corruption 101.
Mm. 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 Tune back in next week for even further insights into these things, and check out Tom's ongoing multiple part series investigating some of these really obvious examples throughout the city of Worcester.
Yeah, and the next piece will be I've written about a lot, but it's a different perspective on this, on the Matt Cosenza case, and I'll just say this: first of all, the city's position is a report written by BOPS that was done 2 years before a civil trial, and then that civil trial went. And that was awarded $8 million. The city removed itself from the case, got itself removed from the case because what these officers did, in theory, was so terrible that they couldn't have possibly trained them to do it. So they got themselves removed from the case, but then fired nobody. And you'll just never imagine this. Now, still, the city's taking this same position as this report from 2 years before trial. And when you see who wrote that report, and you see what the nonsense that they're repeating, it really brings the whole thing into perspective. I think they're lying.
No, I agree. They are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the point of the piece is, of course, they don't care at all what this person actually did because they're not looking. And what I mean is the police officer involved in the case. If this person, fabricated and manipulated evidence, as a civil jury found, they don't seem to care. And so, have they done it before? They're not looking. Did they do it in this case? They're still not looking. So, if it happens to you, oh well.
Mm.
If it happens to your kids, one of your loved ones, oh well. Because what's important is not if innocent people have gone to jail, wrongful incarceration. What's important is there's an election in November, and that's what we're focused on.
And so, real quick,
anybody on city council who wants to dispute that, I welcome it, because if you cared, you'd do something, and you're not. How about an ordinance, for example? Oh wait, you can't create one because you won't hire your own lawyer. You have to ask the administration, and they'll slow roll you for a year, and then argue that you aren't even entitled to the draft of an ordinance, even though you are the exclusive lawmaking body of the city. And you'll buy that crap because you're weak. But how about an ordinance that creates a commission that looks at past cases of people, say on the Brady list, or are known to have, or have credible allegations of manipulating evidence if a jury isn't good enough for you, who we know have lied on reports, and weren't referred for charges because that's a crime in the state. Maybe we should take a look at some of these people that we know have done this in past cases. Did you end up with, somebody who's, lower down the economic scale, who took a plea and did prison time for a thing they didn't do because that was their only option, because they couldn't hire a private lawyer because they had no money? And the answer is almost certainly yes, that's happened. And now you can say that for any place in the country. But that when these things come up, like, oh, something's very untoward here in this individual inside the police department, they don't seem to notice, they don't seem to care, because it won't happen to them. And if it happens to you, oh well. And if you don't like this line of inquiry, folks who might not like this line of inquiry, the best way to get it to stop is to do something. Do something. Don't just sit there like statues every Tuesday. Do something. It's all. And I'm only. And the longer you continue to do nothing, I like. Again, let me say, I like many of the people on city council. Those I've gotten to know, I enjoy as human beings. But the longer I sit there and see you do nothing, the harder the questions I'm going to start, the more aggressive the questions are going to become.
So before we wrap tonight, though, I do have a clarification. Someone asked me about the fire department's contract real quick. And so when Tom and I were talking about the fire department's contract last week, we weren't saying that there isn't a current contract. That's not what we said. What we were talking about is related to some of the overall issues, is that the contract that the firefighters had to wait for was almost 3.5 years long, which Tom specifically said. But just in case someone reported it to a city councilor and gave a completely inaccurate version of the story, the contract took years for them. And what we were saying is that we don't believe that the fire department should have to wait that long for a contract. To be honest with you, I don't understand why the contract negotiations for the fire department are so public and often rancorous from the city management, both with current city manager Batista and Augustus before him and Mike O'Brien before him. Every time the fire department comes up for a contract, it's like a big public fight when they are often our first responders, right? This includes the paramedics and the fire department. They face the most danger, and our city has this weird position of fighting them tooth and nail. But when the police department asks for something, they get whatever they want. They get whatever they want. And so we were making a point that we're not against first responders at all. We're not against people who do those kind of things. We're saying is that the process takes way too long. And multiple times now in the past 15 years, the fire department has had to wait more than a year to have a contract that they operated under, which means that their raises, didn't match pace with the other raises of other places. And so really are in the second biggest city in New England, our fire department is actually underpaid relative to the rest of the municipalities in Massachusetts and beyond.
Yeah, and I don't know if I don't know. I would hope that I brought it up, but I don't remember if I did. Just as a point of reference, the officers union, the union that represents sergeants, lieutenants, captains, they were 2+ years, I think. They just signed a couple months ago, but that also carried on a long time.
Yeah, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So just those are the kind of things that we just think, again, that's not efficient. The city manager, and he's going to talk about it at his State of the City, is going to talk about this visionary goal of being the best managed city in the United States. They have a long way to go to get to that point, a significant long way to go.
It would be nice if he talked about any policy in his
They don't. It's all generalities. There's never anything specific.
I was so irritated. I watched that thing last year. It was insane.
By the way, he watched it live on Manny J Media. By the way, real quick, there's a conversation happened in the comments. So for Molly McGovern's funeral service that they held at St. Bernard's on Friday, there was a bunch of Democratic celebrities there. So Bill Clinton was there, Nancy Pelosi was there, and Nathalie just mentioned that they filled some of the potholes and fixed some of the issues with Lincoln Street. So as much as I feel for the McGovern family, and no one wants to see a child pass before, when the parents are still alive, no one wants to see that. It is interesting that the thing that sped up the process for Lincoln Street and the neighborhood along Lincoln Street was a tragedy that featured significant personas. Again, showing the depth of our poorly managed city. That's really, really morbid to bring up. But why is that the thing that makes them do that? Lincoln Street project has been, and Nathalie can tell you this, I think it's like 13 or 14 months that they have been waiting to do those fixes, but then they just spent all this money and shifted construction. Just the trench. They didn't do the potholes, Nathalie, so they only got one piece done.
I was going to say, because she died like Tuesday. They announced her death like Tuesday, and the funeral's Saturday. I mean, how much can you do in 5 days?
But still, the fact that they mobilized that fast because of something like that, it just shows you that we're just not really. There's a lot of just really weird ways that we do things in the city. And again, I don't want to blame the workers, right? But people are yelling at me, by the way, because of what I had posted about Elm Park thing, saying I was going after the contractors. I'm not going after the contractors. I'm saying out loud that shouldn't be the thing that engages people to do. They cleaned up because there were celebrities coming into town, but that shows that Worcester is not really clean, right? They have to do that to make it look good for a funeral. And listen, and again, the McGovern family, no one wants to see that. It's tragedy, but that's what makes them do it. That's frustrating for the people of Worcester. That shouldn't be what engages that thing. By the way, I'm glad that they did whatever they did, but they should be fixing all of those things on a regularly scheduled basis, not for one particular event.
Yeah, and all that aside, he's a congressman. Of course, he's going to be polarizing. Some people hate him, some people love him. Doesn't seem to be much in between. Always been super kind to me. Again, I have somewhat of a platform, so that does change people's perspectives sometimes, right?
Sure.
But I try and get in front of him once a year, at least once every 2 years at the very least. That happened to be just a few months ago. If I remember correctly, he took a call from his daughter while I was there. But good guy. I mean, I asked him a whole host of stuff, most of it local. Didn't pull punches, gave straight answers. Always tries to be helpful when I kind of seek his insight. Obviously, he's the leading Democrat on the Rules Committee. That is not a committee that meets every 5 months for 10 minutes and then they bang the gavel and go away. It's a real committee that has real power. And you only get to there by being in Washington a long time. I don't know a lot of people that have been in Washington a long time, but him. And always been a stand-up guy to me.
Yeah, and again, I agree with you 100%.
Many condolences to his family.
Yeah, with Jim, there's a bunch of stuff I don't agree about, but I think that he is an accessible federal representative, and that's really what you want out of your federal representative. He makes himself available to people. A regular person can go talk to him. You can have an appointment with him. Now, of course, he represents a massive section of the state of Massachusetts, so there's a ton of people, and so I understand that some people have expressed frustration, but I have found it to be easy to get there, and I've also found it easy to refer people to him. So, like, if someone in our chat really wanted to talk to Jim McGovern, I could probably make that happen because he does listen. Like Tom says, if you have a platform, he'll hear you and he'll meet with constituents on a regular basis. So you may not vote the way you want him to vote in certain situations, but he does consistently do things. And although I disagree with the system, he brings back federal dollars to his district regularly. He has delivered consistently since he was elected, and maybe he didn't deliver all the money that everybody wants for every project, but he brings it back to our district. It's hard to complain about that.
Well, I mean, he'll take positions that aren't necessarily the position of the party, right? Sure. He'll stand up for things when he has, like everybody, he has his kind of pet issues, but he'll really go to bat on issues that he thinks are important that make people in the party sneer, and anything that makes other Democrats upset, I'm for.
Yeah, no, I'm with it. Oh yeah, believe me. By the way, I find his he has voted with the Republicans a couple times on certain things, and I think that's interesting. And I also think he's also been the only vote against some things in Congress on a few times, including some of the leading progressive champions. So, I mean, literally, there's I think I had it in a there was some, I think it was in Slate, maybe, I don't know. I read an article about him in Slate recently, or maybe I might be getting the magazine wrong, but one of the magazines, one of the national magazines, and I think there's been 17 House of Representative votes where there's only been a single opposing vote in the last 20 years, 17 of those. I think 14 of them are Jim McGovern. So good for him being willing to stand up against all his colleagues. I don't know which bills they are, so please don't ask me. They're probably things I don't want to think about.
Yeah,
but that's pretty cool. Again, I like people who stand up against the tide, so to speak. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah,
except for Strom Thurmond, he's a dick. Even though he's dead.
Yeah, even as he rots in hell, he's probably still a dick. Yeah, I mean, and look, he's been on whatever you feel about this. He's for as long as I can remember been on the embargo on Cuba is moronic. When are we going to stop this?
Yeah, it's so foolish. Such a waste of money. What a waste
And
of
that's
money.
that's not necessarily a big political points winner, that issue, right? Been fairly outspoken on what continues to go on in Gaza. So take some positions on what seem, at least, like appear to be on principle, because they aren't very popular, and I can respect that.
By the way, maintained his position on Guantanamo Bay, being an illegally offshore, detention facility. And by the way, if you just remember, President Trump, when he was running for office the first time, used to hammer at Guantanamo Bay, and has flip flopped publicly, and now using it for housing people. Whoever they're throwing over there. It just depends on the day. But just that's another one of those things that, again, he's been the only person who's publicly been against Guantanamo Bay for basically the entire time he's been in Congress. And this is not an issue where the Democrats have a winning record on it, because Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, they've all supported the use of Guantanamo Bay at various points in their careers. And so, and obviously it was opened by or it was expanded by Bill Clinton, and when he was president. So there's these constant uses of that place. It's just an evil facility. Shouldn't be there. We should not be. America shouldn't be maintaining that kind of facility. Just shouldn't be there. Just shouldn't be there. And so I agree with Jim on that one.
Well, it wouldn't if we were the country we should be on. Anyway, we're never doing a show this long ever again, and it's time for. It is time for. I was trying to read that message. It is time for John's favorite part of the show.
And I rebuke you and your consistent dishonesty about this section of the show. Everybody knows this is a known thing. The biggest celebrities in the world and the folks that are the poorest on earth know that this is the number one most requested section of the show, and that is when John asks Tom about his favorite things. That is true. It is a very underreported issue. It's a good point. It gave us the movie A Few Good Men. Sean just hitting the comments there. But this is the favorite part of everybody's show. It by far is when I ask Tom a question that leads to him answering about his favorite things. Now today happens to be Star Wars Day, and Tom is the lone person on earth who doesn't like Star Wars. He just doesn't have any interest for it, doesn't care about Star Wars. But it is in the popular lexicon, so it's possible that he does have an answer for this question. It's possible. So the question is, there's got to be a Star Wars question. It's May the 4th, bro. What's your favorite Star Wars character? And if you don't have an answer for it, it's okay. We're going to make it easy for you, Tom. What's your favorite science fiction character of all time?
No, I can give a Star. I mean, it's going to be an old Star Wars character, but I mean, don't you have to go with Yoda?
No, you don't have to go with Yoda.
Is that a dumb answer? I don't know. He's sure he's
no,
old?
It's not with that.
He moves stuff with his head.
He can move stuff with his mind. That's very true. So Yoda, Tom with the easy answer, Yoda. If you want to respond in the chat, you guys can all tell us your favorite. Are you a Star Trek guy over Star Wars, Tom? Is that what it is?
No.
I
think I watched some episodes. I mean, I was young at the time, like when Next Generation was actually airing originally.
Yeah.
I watched some of those, but I mean,
yeah. By the way, that's by far the best Star Trek show that ever was. And I know that's super controversial, but it was not even close. My Baby Yoda, that's Grogu. Maria, get his name right. My favorite.
Look at you dressing down people over Star Wars stuff.
Get his name right. So I will say this: up until 2 years ago, I would say my favorite Star Wars character of all time was Greedo, one of the bounty hunters. And that's very nerdy of me to say that, right? A specific bounty hunter. I loved Greedo, loved that guy, loved everything about him. However, with the new show Andor, which is by far one of the best shows in the history of television, it's so good. It's unbelievably good, Tom. I'm sorry. It's not a Star Wars show, really. It's a show about politics. It's so freaking good, dude. Tony Gilroy has created a masterpiece. This show is literally, if it goes on for 5 or 6 seasons, it could be in the conversation with The Sopranos. It's that good of a show. I don't know if it can because the timeline of the show is impossible, but it's so freaking good. My favorite character is Cassian Andor. I love that guy. That character is just such a good character. It really is. He's complicated, he's in depth. And Tom, you're disappointed me for not watching the show. The Ewoks were cool.
Actually, I'm
Ewoks.
gonna change my answer. My favorite Star Wars character was Barf. Oh wait, that's
Barf. Spaceballs.
Sorry, gotta mix that.
That's okay. It's okay to make fun of Star Wars too, by the way, because Star Wars has all kinds of flaws, but the show Andor is spectacular. Spectacular show. Especially if you've never watched the Star Wars show before. It's by far, because a bunch of the other Star Wars shows have these fatal flaws. They're just terrible shows. Not for the reasons that you think, by the way. And but there's just a bunch of them are just really poorly written. But Andor is great. Great in so many ways. I love it. And I haven't seen an Ewok yet. And I love the Ewoks too. I'm not an anti-Ewok guy. And I'm also pro a lot of the controversial characters in Star Wars. Look at the people the people in the chat responding to you in your face.
You know what I'm watching right now? Because if I'm going to watch a piece of fiction, it's going to be a historical fiction. It's based on real people and whatnot. Doing some rewatching of. I've been on a watch old shows kick. Did Dexter, did Lost again. And I'm doing Deadwood, which is maybe my favorite show of all time.
Deadwood, yeah.
So yeah, I'm not doing stuff.
You got to do Andor, dude. You'll love it. You will love it. I challenge you to watch Andor and not love it. I challenge you.
I have passed 14 years old.
It's not a show for kids, dude. It's not at all. It's not at all. It is not. Please, someone in the chat who's watched Andor, talk about this show. It's so good. Such a good show. Of course, they're gonna go.
Yeah, see, I said Lost, so they're all gonna and Dexter.
Dexter. By the way, Dexter was a great show too. Great show.
It was.
Even the edited version. The one that they showed on CBS, remember they did the edited version? It was actually still pretty good. They did that. They did. It was like very selectively cut. They didn't go as far with the as they did on the HBO.
Yeah, like him, you can see him almost getting gratification when he's looking in people's eyes as they die. Yeah, it's a little creepy. The end was everybody hates not the extra season. The extra season was all right. I watched it, but I mean the actual original series. If you don't like the way that ended, let me tell you right now, wrong.
That's it. Wrong. Just wrong.
That's it, you're wrong.
I love how Star Wars has The Wire was a great show. I
only watched pieces of it. So and I don't understand. Everybody wanted the finality. You wanted him to die or something final, just like they wanted out of Sopranos. They wanted some sort of finality. That's not how life works, folks.
Sopranos is perfect.
They did. So that he's a different person. He's got his his beard all grown out, and he's like working in a what are they, the tree farm place, cutting trees, and and it just ends with him looking at the camera, and he's got that look in his eyes like, I gotta eat, because that's who he is. That's the guy you liked for 7 seasons, 6 seasons, 7 seasons, 7 seasons. That's the guy you liked, and he's really bleeped up. It was how it's supposed to end.
He's got a lot of stuff going on. A lot of stuff going on.
All right. Thank you all for your part. Did I read the books? I did not read the books. I haven't read a piece of fiction in more years than I would care to recollect being older than. I just don't. I don't do it. Like I watch a little bit of TV.
Dude, I love how everybody lights up for diners and TV. They just like we
Yeah,
get all the
only
comments
second the
from those
diners.
diners and TV. We get all the comments. The books are dumb because the books. I feel like the books were written after the show because they just don't. Or maybe there was one that was written before the show and then they made them all. They just don't fit the show Dexter at all. They're very strange. The books. I don't understand them.
The extra season was kind of cool. He was in a much different setting because, of course, he had to disappear. And then,
Yeah.
Spoiler alert: the kid tracks him down. And then again, spoiler alert: he doesn't. Dexter doesn't make it because everybody got the finale that they wanted because it was the extra season. But then I've heard something about they're thinking about bringing
Yeah.
it back again. And
Spoiler alert: they're already in production for another season of Dexter.
oh, are they really?
Spoiler.
So it was
Yes.
done really well, which is good. And that's cool because I mean it literally like leaves you thinking, okay, that's that. And if they bring it back, he's going to survive that. And
Supposedly it starts literally at the last second that the last show ended. Supposedly. That's what I've heard.
oh, crazy.
Yeah. So I don't know what that means for
Because he's been got. If that's
Yeah.
the case, he's been got again. Of course, they got him in that too, and he, you know.
correct.
Did you
By the way,
watch that?
if you love The Wire, go back and watch Homicide: Life in the Streets with Andre Braugher. And because most of the people who know Andre Braugher know him from the whatchamacallit, the Andy Samberg show that he was the comedian on. Go back and watch Homicide: Life on the Streets, and you will be blown away. Or LA Law. Oh, another great show. It was great. It was a great show.
All right, we're never doing a show this long ever again.
Yeah. You said that multiple times, and we've still done shows this long.
I said it once, and it was 15 minutes ago. Yeah, and also, by the way, as you said, as you agreed, and people that didn't like the end of The Sopranos are also what? Wrong.
They are wrong. The Sopranos is great. It's just great.
Because
the people who say that didn't get it. They didn't get the show. That's what it was. They just didn't understand.
Life. That's life for him. Every person could be the last one. That's life.
Right. That's exactly how it goes. I will say I question the use of "Don't Stop Believing," but that's the only question that I have.
Listen, it's almost 3 hours here, Maria. I mean, there's only so many stupid things I can say before I say things I've already said that are stupid.
That's true. But we have kept the audience. There's more than 100 people still watching,
which is crazy.
So,
what is wrong with you people? Why do you like us? Why do you like us? I don't understand. So you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, kids. Have a great week. Join us again next Sunday. We do this every week at 8:30. Until then, stay alive. Don't lose your mind like I will over our silly city government. And we will try to screw it up again less next week. See you then.
Go check out Old Friends.